Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
And you ain't black.
The first time ever any...
What are you people? We're Americans.
We are Americans indeed. My name is Vincent.
And I am Sori.
And this is Middle America with Vin and Sori. This is a unique one. This I gotta say is something we've never really done before. But you know, it is social commentary, and there are gonna be spoilers. So if you haven't watched the show in its entirety from seasons 1 through 4, then
bow out of this if you don't want to know.
Bow out of this if you don't want to hear any spoilers. But the impetus actually for me watching the show was really had to do a lot with my left-wing friends, left-leaning friends, pro-choice friends, pro-abortion friends, whatever you want to say, who are of the female persuasion, shall we say, that especially post-Roe, ever since the leaked document, this term keeps getting thrown around. We're in the Handmaid's Tale world, in the Handmaid's Tale. And, I think like most, people who are pro-life or whatever, we kind of just shrug that off. We kind of had a dismissive attitude about that connection being made. And honestly, I still think that there is a ton of propaganda in the show series, but at the same time, the ladies that were expressing this were, in my mind, some of the most intelligent people I've run into. And so I thought to myself, well, these are really intelligent people. And do you really think all your female friends who are talking about that they're all dumb and they're all brainwashed, or maybe there's something to this show relative to the current situation and things of that nature? And so I went in there, I said, you know what, I'm going to watch this show, not really as an attempt to understand the show or even understand the message of the show. I initially went into watching the show because I wanted to understand the mind state of my friends, right? I wanted to understand how they were making those correlations between the two, because in my mind, obviously, there were no correlations, but I was extremely surprised by this show, by the team of people writing this show, and I do believe that this show, if you just look at it at the surface level, dovetails nicely into a standard, progressive, even young, millennial, liberal worldview, right? If you're just looking at the surface. But if you actually look beneath the surface, I think that there is actually, the messaging is actually a lot deeper, and actually, I would say if I was a feminist, I would be deeply troubled actually by this show, because of some of the implications of the show. I would have been seriously troubled by it. But anyway, without further ado, having said that, I do want to get into the show. So the show is called Handmaid's Tale, obviously. It starts off with this woman named June, and she's got a black friend named Moira, and June and Moira are friends. Moira is a lesbian. June is kind of a young, 20-something-ish, 30-something-ish. She meets this guy, I think his name is Luke, the black guy. Luke is married, but his girl can't get pregnant, and that's something that's really important to him. And Luke is still married when he meets June. And so that's a really interesting take. Yeah. Because it portrays June as someone who is participating in breaking this convention that I think still, no matter if you're a progressive on the progressive side or not, sleeping with somebody's husband is usually off limits. You don't have to be a puritanical, Christian to have the worldview that if the guy is married, he should be off limits. So immediately June is actually portrayed as a bit of a transgressor, as a person who...
Yeah, but you find that out later. You don't know at first. They're just together, and
You find out what that he's married.
yeah, that's not something that you find out right off. You find that out later.
I mean, she said he had a ring on when they were talking about sharing the hot dogs.
Yeah, but what season was that? I don't remember seeing that hot dog scene until later.
Right. That was
you just see them together, and I'm pretty sure at the beginning, the very first scene is them running. They're trying to escape.
Right. Yeah. You're right. As the season goes on, you see that their relationship,
it gets a little more complex.
yeah, their relationship. It comes out that he was married and all that, and again. But I do think it's a foreshadow of the kind of character that June is going to be, because she's portrayed as the protagonist and you want to cheer for her, but then when you look at the roots of her and Luke's relationship, you're like, yo, you were with another woman. She essentially betrayed another woman, because those are conventions that even if you're a secularist, secularists hold to that too. If somebody's taken, then you definitely don't impede. But on top of that, he was married, and yet she was willing.
That's like a really terrible reason to leave somebody, because they can't have children.
Right. So she's, if you really look now, again, you're so caught up in the moment in the show that you look at her and she's a hero and you want her and Luke to work out because she likes Luke. And there's one time when they're in the bed after they've done whatever, she says, "I want you to leave her." And so he goes, okay, and you're cheering for her, but at the same time, that's a really selfish, self-centered thing to do. She's doing it in the name of love, but she's destroying a life at her expense, and that is gonna be the tension that June, this character, deals with all throughout the show, is dealing with her own streak of selfishness, and her willingness to transgress boundaries at some points we'll see is very helpful, but at other points it really costs people, and there are times when people in the show call her on it. But that is a really interesting take, because she is already breaking the rules, and you, like I said, you want to cheer for her. But like it was kind of a cringy moment for me when she looked at him and said, "Leave your wife," and all that. Like to me, that was a very important moment in the show, because it shows the kind of person she's gonna be in this dystopian world that they end up.
That's so interesting. Because when I saw that scene, I was just thinking, wow, that was easy. Usually you see, like, when that's portrayed in movies or shows, it's always like the person will like sleep with them, but then they don't want to actually leave the relationship that they're in.
Right.
So they're kind of like using the side person.
Right.
And so I was just shocked to see him just say okay so quickly like that.
Yep. So that was a very, very interesting. Okay, so here's what happens. The bad guys in this show are what I would call hyper-patriarchalists. These are men and women who believe in what you would call a traditional family, yada, yada, yada. I mean, to me, they went out of their way to portray, these are evangelical Christians, right? I mean, that's obviously what they were going for. Probably. The strain of evangelicalism that we came from specifically. The focus on the family type evangelicalism, the type of people who like recently want to roll back gay marriage, don't believe in any sort of female autonomy, terrified of female power, that attaches every failure in society to the man crisis, whatever. And one of the main issues that was brought up throughout this is the birth rate. Right. So in this very not too distant dystopian future, America is struggling with the birth rate. Now, it's a fact. The American birth rate is precipitously low. Elon Musk and other people have talked about it. And one of the things that's curious to me in the show is that it gets treated, the only people that express the problem with the birth rate are far right-wing evangelicals. Right? So every time that comes up, it's always Joseph Fiennes' character. Joseph Fiennes, his name is Mr. Fred Waterford. So it focuses on Fred and his wife Serena. And so the only time you hear about the birth rate crisis is when Fred is talking about it, when he's defending some of the crazy practices in Gilead that we'll see in a second. And I actually thought that was a weakness in the show, because the New York Times, as recently as May 2021, has reported on this, that the United's birth rate dropped again, particularly during the pandemic.
What? I thought it increased.
No, it actually dropped during the pandemic. So the New York Times reported on that. And the New York Times is not a far-right outlet. I mean, you can say what you want, but they're not a far-right outlet by any stretch of the imaginations. And they reported on this in 2021. I'll put it right here. And again, I thought it was a strength of the show in the sense of I definitely see evangelicals jumping on this topic and sort of really being concerned about it. But that topic is not only a topic that evangelicals worry about.
Oh, I see.
Here it is again. The U.S. birth rate has dropped again. The pandemic may be accelerating the decline. Let me just read this part. Overall, the birth rate declined by 4% in 2020. Births were down most sharply in December, when babies conceived at the start of the health crisis would have been born, etc., etc. But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I mean, if you'll remember, there was like that other, I don't know if it was another country or another place. I don't remember what place it was. But they came to Gilead because they wanted to be able to trade.
Yes.
So it was known more than just within Gilead.
Yes.
And also, when they end up in Canada and there's all of this fallout, part of the reason why people started supporting Fred and Serena is because he brought up the dropping birth rate and how they were able to continually have children over there. So it was more known. I mean, I understand it wasn't said all the time by more than just Fred, but it was understood beyond Gilead.
It was, but then that woman in that country were portrayed horribly.
Yeah.
So that's my point. My point is the only people concerned about the birth rate in this world are people that are non-Gileadians,
yeah,
right?
okay.
So good people like Canada, and we'll talk about that in a second. Good people don't worry about the birth rate.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Only crazy right-wingers are worried about the birth rate. And again, I just thought that's a mistake, because Kenneth Johnson, a demographer at the University of New Hampshire, has calculated that together with the rise in deaths, up by about 18% from 2019, the drop in births is contributing to the aging of the American population. A total of 25 states have more deaths than birth last year.
Oh my gosh.
Up from 5 at the end of 2019. The birth rate is the lowest it's ever been, he said. At some point, the question is going to be, the women who delayed having babies, are they ever going to have them? If they don't, that's a permanent notch in the American birth structure.
Whoa.
Okay, so that's not a far-right outlet. That's a demographer. That's what he does for work. And when you have that's what, how many states in the union?
25, I think they said.
25? That's about 50% of the states in the union had more deaths than births. Now, obviously, that's obviously a concern if you're thinking about the next generation. I'll tell you guys, we've got 5-6 kids.
Yeah, we're doing our part.
We'll probably have 7 to 9.
Babe,
and,
this is number 7.
Yeah, so we'll probably have 8 to 10. And absolutely, cultural warfare is a major value in our family. Mm-hmm. We do that. That's the main reason my kids don't go to public school. Mm-hmm. Because I am purposely I'm having kids and inculcating them with our worldview, because from my vantage point, people are going to get upset about this. From my vantage point, all worldviews that are false will end up cannibalizing themselves. So if you have a worldview that says you could just kill your own progeny, which is completely antithetical even from an evolutionary perspective, when you're talking about natural selection, fitness payoffs, and the goal of existence, which is to pass on that DNA. So even from a secular evolutionary perspective, you're playing with fire with this mass killing of children. But for me, I'm looking at it like, okay, our generation is completely invested in themselves. We know 99% of these actions are because we want to, increase monetarily and all the rest of it. But what I see is, okay, so if we have 10 kids, We inculcate them with our worldview. They have 6 to 10 kids, etc., etc. Then in a generation or two, the folks who believe what we believe are going to outnumber the folks that believe what they believe, because they've unfortunately, they don't have anybody to pass their ideology to, because they've killed them. So,
and in most cases, every branch that you have, like let's say each of your kids is a branch, is going to make more branches, because chances are your one child is not going to have just one child. Chances are all of our kids at this age are all saying they want a big family. Right. The smallest family that they're talking about is 3 kids, which is still considered rather large for American standards. Right. So when you look at, we've got 7 kids, and if all of them just have 3, I mean, you're talking 21 more. So
yeah. So you know, that is the major concern for these guys, and I like that as the problem, because it's real. It is something that I could definitely see evangelicals do talk about it, especially the Quiver Full movement. And so I thought that was brilliant. What wasn't brilliant to me was there was no sort of left-wing or anti-patriarchal solution to that problem. It was just, listen to these guys, he's crazy. And their solution for the problem is crazy. Well, yeah, of course, their solution was crazy. We're going to talk about the solution to the problem in a second. Is absolutely crazy. But not having a solution to the problem is also crazy. It's a fact. We definitely have a problem. And, you know, there was this special a couple years ago, you know, whatever, people call it what it wants, called Londonistan. And it talks about the reproductive sort of patterns of Muslim immigrants over and against the reproductive pattern of the, you know, stodgy run-of-the-mill white, you know, European. And you're aborting your kid at a 70% clip. And these people, when these girls get pregnant, 16, 17, it's a giant celebration. They have about 4 or 5 Hamzas, a couple of Khadijas, and an Aisha here and there. So then when you look at laws like Sharia and things like that, when you're talking about a democracy, democracy becomes a numbers game. And if you're part of a movement that's smart enough to realize that, then you can essentially take over a country. I mean, a lot of these imams have said it explicitly over there. They've explicitly said it. And I've said it on the Christian side. I'm saying it out publicly. And to be honest, there's nothing they can do, because they've so wired themselves, culturally speaking, to do this, that they're not going to be able to bring that culture into the next generation. And so that's why you had, you know, all these different waves of feminism, and now you have pro-life feminists, because you have as they get younger and younger and younger, and they move away from your ideology, and there's people their age that think like them, that has influence. Okay, so that's the major theme, is that you've got this group of hardened right-wing evangelicals, and you find out that they get to the point where they're willing to do terrorist attacks and kill people in order to take control of the government. I don't really know how all the inner machinations they had behind the scenes meetings, but long story short, they're successful. They take over the government, and then there's this one horrible scene where all the women are brought together at a business meeting at work, and they're all fired simultaneously. And I thought that scene was terrifying, because it was sort of like this, what is going on here? And then one of the major themes of that show is the weakness of good men. The first time you see this is the boss, he basically looks at June and says, there's nothing I can do. Yeah, he looks like he's sorry, but that there's nothing that he can do. Then they all get booted out of there, and they're all leaving with their boxes. Like, they have a very short amount of time to get out, too. It's like, it adds to the drama of it, and then as they're leaving, there's just tons of people standing there, tons of men with weapons to make sure that they're all going home. Yeah. And then I think it's like the next day, or the very, very shortly after, all of their bank accounts are all closed. Yeah, that's another one. They have to contact the bank to get their money wired to their next of kin that is a male. The only people that can have money are men. The women they need the men. Which something that got pointed out, basically, that women couldn't really get credit cards till 1979 or whatever. Now, I don't know how, like, perfectly accurate that was, but it's close enough to be accurate history. Where
When I looked it up, that's what I was seeing.
yeah,
Because they were saying that is what I guess kept a lot of women in bad relationships, was because the money was, they had no place to go, and they couldn't even get a credit card to be able to try to.
I mean, you experienced that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
I did, yeah.
You were going through divorce, and the guy, you were working at home, as in taking care of the child, and
Yeah.
and all that. But as soon as the relationship went sour, you didn't have a job, he had a job, so he had all the
Right.
He had
And then
all the
he took the
currency.
vehicle.
yeah.
And I was just left at home. It's pretty crazy because I was watching a show series that had that sort of same storyline where she had no vehicle, she had no means of income. And when you've been out of work for a couple of years, it's harder to get a job because you don't really have anything on your record. And then at that point, you're already going through a very difficult time, and your child is going through a difficult time. So then to strip them of all that they've known, because their entire life has been, okay, mom's there when I get up, mom's there when I go to bed, and everything just starts changing drastically. And yeah, he withheld all of the funds, and I was in real trouble because I couldn't even pay basic bills, obviously. So thankfully I was able to, I don't know if you...
No, it's fine.
Vinny started helping me out a lot, and no strings attached, just helping me, which was crazy, unexpected, and confusing to me all at the same time.
But that's why that sequence was powerful to me, was because I was thinking about you, and I was thinking about how, if I wasn't there, what would have happened, because you didn't have any other dudes that were gonna step up and
Nope.
support you that way.
Nope.
So that was a particularly troubling. That whole sequence of events was a particular. The other, I also know, we've got so many different bank accounts, juggling between the two. I know you hate going to the store and it's the wrong card, it gets declined, that type of situation. So I was just thinking about all those situations. If you were in that situation and I wasn't there, or I was there, I gotta say, Luke, the black husband of this woman, is an absolute. He's spineless, extremely frustrating character to me.
Literally the only time that we saw him with any sort of backbone at all was when he was chewing out his wife when he was leaving her for June. You remember that phone call?
Yeah.
That's the only time we ever saw that kind of energy from him.
Yeah. He's an extremely passive dude, and a very poor representation of.
Yeah, I thought so too. I
black,
felt offended.
The black male, but look, this is a trope in our community, particularly with black dudes that end up with white women. I mean, it as far as marrying them, that is a trope that you're because you're bougie. If you were to be able to snag a white woman and actually marry her, that means you're bougie. You're not part of the culture. Yada yada yada.
Oh, really? You kind of get booted out of your own culture?
Well, no. If people make assumptions about you if they don't know you. You see what I'm saying? Like I was talking to the Israelites. He's saying all types of reckless shit. But then when I was in Cali, we were in LA by where they were. I was like, "Yo, let's meet up. Let's hook up. Blah blah blah." And I said, "Just don't say nothing reckless about my wife. But let's meet up." That he never returned anything. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
my point is there is that assumption in the hood until but that's why I'm wow, she got this dude really pegged, because I'm sorry, a lot of soft dudes out there, but yeah, June's husband, whatever, I'll just call him a boyfriend from here on out. He's just a fucking sorry excuse for a man. But there's what was that movie? Promising Young Woman?
Yeah.
All the
What about
dudes in
it?
Promising Young Woman were bad.
I know.
They were all bad, even if they started out
I
with...
didn't even realize it until you pointed it out.
Yeah, even if you started out with good motives...
You were like, everybody's bad but her?
Yeah.
Everybody?
Yeah. Even if the guy started out with good motives, it didn't take long to realize he was bad. Whereas in Handmaid's Tale, the characters are a lot more dynamic, which I appreciate.
They are.
Luke is kind of the only one that really doesn't move. His character through all 4 seasons is exactly the same. Passive, reactionary, just completely, to me, there's toxic masculinity, which is, to me, toxic masculinity has 2 versions. One is the scummy guy who gets drunk and beats the hell out of his wife, And then the other form of toxic masculinity is the scummy guy who will watch another guy beat the hell out of his wife and do nothing. And that kind of toxic. So the scale of toxic masculinity was in full display. I don't know if she was doing that on purpose or not, but there was definitely the message that in order for these people to take over, you have got to have some participation, not only from women, but also from good men. And that participation is either completely turning a blind eye or letting evil guys do something and then say, hey, there's nothing I can do. There's so many times when that line is repeated in the mouth of men. So they're good men, but they're mostly cowards. There are no real good men left in America in this show. All the good men are located in Canada, and we'll talk about that soon. It's just the worst part of the show to me, honestly. This is the worst part of the show to me.
That was the worst?
That was the worst part of the show. The whole
What?
Canada, it was such bullshit. I'm like, this is a country where the prime minister is a fucking racist bastard, walks around twice in blackface. Okay, the guy was a professor, walks around in blackface, and then when his own citizens go to protest him, he declares literal economic warfare on them, so much so that their version of the ACLU had to publicly rebuke him. I mean, it's just the worst possible time to try to exalt Canada over America. Fuck Justin Trudeau and everybody with him. Honestly, fuck Justin Trudeau.
I mean, I get all that.
That whole show turned me completely against Canada.
I get all... That's
Much
so
love
wild.
to Canada, but fuck Justin Trudeau, honestly.
I hear all that you're saying, but for me, the systematic rape was just, ugh. That was the worst to me.
What about the kind of toxic masculinity where the man acts as if his wife is beneath him that exists? Yeah, no, I agree, Grim. I agree. That would be the first form of toxic masculinity. The guy who gets drunk and beats the hell out of his wife. He beats the hell out of her because he believes that she's beneath him. He can do whatever he wants to her. And that runs the gamut. And I'm not just talking about, some non-religious guy who goes to the bar every Friday. I'm talking about the religious guy, too. The religious guy will go home and beat the hell out of his wife, too. So my point is, toxic masculinity...
Sometimes in the name of God.
Mashallah, yeah, you're correct.
That's worse.
Right? And that's worse than the guy at the bar. I agree. Okay, so here's the real kicker. So what happens is... Fred and his wife, it's fascinating because Fred is the mouthpiece. His wife is actually the mastermind.
Yeah.
And that was a very fascinating perspective that they brought. This is why I said, the writers of this show, many of whom, because I watched the credits at the end, many of the writers are female. But the writers of this show did a fantastic job of layering their characters, showing how complex they were, and showing the necessity of female support for the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is these guys take over the government in a sort of January 6th style kind of takeover. And they were definitely using Trumpisms and Trump illusions. Like one of the cops is called ICE, on the back and all the rest of it. But these guys take over and they turn America essentially into this place called Gilead. Gilead is it's a
section of America. It's not all of America.
It's a section of it, but they've basically taken over all of America, essentially. Texas seceded. They succeeded in seceding, and then you have
Chicago
Canada.
wasn't completely taken over,
and then you
right?
have other places that are holdouts. Chicago was a major holdout, which was also fascinating, because to me, that tells me one of the unintended messages of this movie. Of the show series, which was gun control. Mm-hmm. Namely, the only people who had guns when the takeover happened were the bad guys. Later on in the show series, when June gets a gun, you're like, oh yeah, now we're gonna even the scales, and then you realize, holy shit, if all these women had guns, these women get pushed to the point where they'd rather die than live under that situation, and a lot of them do a lot of suicidal shit. If those girls were packing, that would have been the situation. And the one state that gets mentioned as a holdout is Chicago, which is flooded with guns, as we know. They have a crazy strict gun law, but they also don't follow it, and it just turns out that Chicago is it's not a good argument for gun control, in my opinion. It's like sort of a remix, like the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good woman with a gun, right? Is basically the idea. But that was a subplot. Anyway, these people take over. They get all the power, and they're able to transform the majority of America into this place called Gilead. Gilead is their patriarchal utopia. And the main order of business in Gilead is to, in my view, establish male supremacy. Gilead is a extremely hierarchical society. Everybody has a title, and everybody has a role, and everybody's expected to play that position. So at the top is what you would call a commander. A commander is sort of the board. And the commander, he owns a family. And when I say owns a family, he owns a family. He's married to his wife. They get dressed up in teal suits. And then the wife has a handmaid, okay? And then within the house, there are also a class of servants named Marthas. And the Marthas are basically the homekeepers, okay? The handmaids are essentially indentured concubines, basically. And then the other category is the aunts. So Aunt Lydia, et cetera, et cetera. And the aunt functions to...
and then there was the eyes, too, that were there, too.
Yeah, I'm talking about the women right now.
Oh,
So the
okay.
women they're either handmaids, they're Marthas, or they're an aunt. Or they're a Jezebel. We'll talk about Jezebel in a second. So the handmaid's job is to have sex with the commander, the man of the house, and procreate children. The Martha's job is essentially to be a maid, and the aunt's job is to bring in the newest handmaid. Handmaidens are women of childbearing age, and I think one of the things is they already had kids or something, like they could prove that they could have children, basically. And the job of the aunt is basically to process these new handmaidens, break their spirits, so that they understand to play their position. What were you saying?
No, I just saw Skylar's message. Sorry, stop looking at me mad with that look. I feel like I did something wrong. Yeah. All that is correct so far.
Yeah. So, and Sadie believes that it was written in 1985, so it's prophetic. I don't see much of the prophecies being fulfilled.
No, once you see us breaking it down, it's very weird.
But be that as it may, I do think it's an important precautionary tale. And Sadie, honestly, I mean, every single time the show comes on, it says based on the book by Margaret Atwood, so everybody knows that this is based on a book series. Okay, so those are the categories of the women, right? So the aunts have the most authority among the women, and the aunts report directly into the commanders. And then you have this dude called the Eye. Now the Eye functions much like the KGB. His job is to watch and report everything that goes on to the main base. Okay. Now, here are some of the rougher, more controversial parts of the show, which actually is the reason we watched this show initially when it first came out, first couple episodes, and then there was the ceremony, and when the ceremony happened, it was me. I was gonna say
I didn't want to stop watching it.
I said I'm done with the show.
But I've been in like the evangelical world, and the way that there is control over the women and the patriarchy that goes along with it, and being a part of a cult, and you could just see, like, even like I look back at some of the ways that that school that I was with was run, like people didn't necessarily have freedom for who they were going to choose to marry. They were pressured a lot by the higher ups to, for them to be the matchmakers, and it wasn't about your own choice. And if you made a choice against what the higher ups said, because you were indoctrinated with this way of thinking, you felt like basically you were shipwrecking your life, because if anything went wrong from that point forward, it was because you didn't listen to them, not realizing that every marriage is going to have its problems. So they're all going to run into problems. And then you're going to start second guessing, I should have listened to them. And so for me, like, and also the ceremonial rape that was taking place in the show, while it was completely crazy because it was like somebody outside of your marriage, I don't think that the idea itself is that crazy when you're looking at what women are expected to do in certain marriages within certain subcultures, and rape that is within marriages that is not categorized as rape because you're married.
Right.
So for me, it was like watching, okay, that's life for a lot of people. A lot of women have experienced, not to this degree, but other forms of this. So it was therapeutic, but also like, I don't know, you felt like you were sort of being heard when the show was going on, because it was like, okay, like they're creating this show because there's a whole host of people that say that this is wrong. And yeah, so I was very curious to see like, where is the show gonna go? And obviously when the show starts out, like you're looking at June and you see that the focus is very much on her, and so you're like, at some point this is going to flip and she's going to gain her freedom. And so I guess I wanted to live that out with her, like watch her get her freedom. And that scene was obviously traumatizing. I mean, it had a really rough effect on me.
I'm not gonna say I was traumatized. Like I'm not. I think I hear what you're saying.
Very terrible for me.
My problem was it wasn't even an instance of marital rape. That
Right.
was the only reason she was there, was to be raped. That's my problem. That was one of my issues. My other issue, obviously, was when that was happening. Serena, the husband of Fred, played along and held the girl down while that was happening.
Yeah.
So there was just a lot of.
And the
It's one
way
of those situations where I thought to myself, I don't know who's more despicable in this situation.
Yeah, because to be honest with
between
you,
Serena and Fred.
when the first scene plays out, like he doesn't look like he's really like into it. Eventually he gets into it and he takes it really far. But at first he's looking away. He's, you know what I mean? Like it looks like he's not like.
Yeah,
And
Fred, yeah.
she I think that the first, like when I saw the first one, I felt like the way that Serena because her skirt is underneath June's head, and the way she rips her skirt out from underneath June's head after June just goes through that whole thing for their supposed child to come along. I don't know, it was just really sick for me. Seeing the women doing that to other women was even worse, because maybe it's,
yeah, we're gonna talk about that. But if you look at evangelicalism, I've seen that, where yes, there's a lot of patriarchal environments in churches, but there are women of influence in those churches, and they use their influence to teach the younger women to be treated that way.
right.
And I would say up to, I've seen, there is a famous one. I'm not trying to give her any traffic, but there's a woman that posts on Facebook regularly, and she always talks about how, women who claim they're abused, they're just saying that because they have a disagreement. Very horrible relative to marital rape, marital assault, all those types of things. And
What did you say about marital rape? My mind just went.
she's bad on it. I don't want to go into details, so I don't want people to Google her, because I believe she's extremely toxic. But they really, really, really highlighted the toxic femininity that goes along with patriarchy and is necessary for its survival. And I just think about all these different contexts, whether in evangelical context, there are absolutely women who do that, and those are the women that get exalted in those churches. I remember, you were going in a situation, let's just say that there was some mistreatment happening, and you stood up for yourself and said, no, I'm not taking this. I'm out of 3,000. And they cut your throat multiple times, those people. Meanwhile, there was another guy who was extremely abusive, horrible, woman had to go to the hospital, horrible, cheated on her in front of everybody, whole 9 yards, just really terrible. And they encouraged, all the older women surrounded this woman, encouraged her to overlook all that, demonize Sori, you don't want to be like her. They had all these off-site meetings about her. Meanwhile, they're encouraging this woman to go back to this horrible, abusive person, yada, yada, yada. And so they kind of made this woman a hero to contrast with Sori. And the point is, that was women leading that charge for the most part. In that entire situation, a lot of it. Obviously, the men were there; they had authority, you know, in church, whatever. But it was really fascinating to see, because there were purveyor. It was so fascinating, like being in that situation, watching, and this is where like I had to like really stop. My biases against this show started to change, because I was like, wait a second, like I started thinking about certain dudes. I'm like, yo, I'm not sure that these guys wouldn't want a culture like this. I'm not sure, like the handmaid thing where you have a woman who lives with you and does that's pretty weak. We're going to show you in the Bible where that came from in a second.
Yeah, because they read a verse.
But the overall culture, women not being able to read. I mean, I've been in some of these circles with some of these people where like they go back to women being able to vote as like being this horrible situation. And what's fascinating is the first feminists, their argument for suffrage was, we go to church more than the boys, so we should have a spiritual influence. And this is why everything sucks so bad, is because you guys won't let us vote, and we're going to church at a clip of 2.5% over you guys, so we should be able, like, so, but I do know, like, I remember, like, you would mention the term feminist in any sort of positive light, these people would go crazy. They'd go absolutely crazy, and I'd say, well, which feminist authors are you reading? Like, I'm not even talking about like third wave feminist, every man is a rapist, whatever. I'm just talking about standard, women are equal, we should have the same rights, that kind of thing. We had in our church, we had at least externally the most submissive group of women there as far as people following the Bible, but the women were, you know, people come to me and say, hey, can I say this? Will you let us do that? And I'd have to tell the girls, like, I'm not letting you do anything. It's not my job to let you do anything. You're commanded to share this stuff, so if God tells you to do something, you have to go up there, and he's not going to accept. The boys wouldn't let me talk as an excuse, so you better go up there and handle your business. Like, even, so it was weird, like, even when you're teaching this to women in an evangelical circle where it benefits them, they still had a problem with it. Like when I was talking about feminism in the church, like the people that like initially had the most issues were the women. And anybody who's heard me talk for any period of time, like nobody would consider me like a far leftist when it comes to men and women. But I was just saying like, hey, can we relook at some of this stuff and maybe, you know, and I mean, so as I was watching the show, when they weren't doing the crazy stuff like the systemic rapes and things like that, although to your point, a lot of these dudes don't, I'm sure if I polled these dudes, they don't even think marital rape exists. They think that's laughable to them. Yeah, they think as soon as you're married, they really believe it's some sort of like, you know, eternal concubinage or something like that. So I definitely saw like, that was one of the major kind of wake up calls for me when I started watching the show, was the necessity of female participation in the oppressive system. It's necessary in just the same way that you always had the Uncle Tom. You always had the black guy who was working for Massa because he got certain benefits. And so when Nat Turner's plotting his revolution, you got the little light-skinned house Negro going to Massa and saying, I don't know, they're planning a revolution. And he's the first one that gets lined up. So I definitely saw like a similarity and a pattern, like, okay, like people gonna get upset, the Candace Owens type people who are willing to completely sell out their folks because they get benefits for being that token Negro. There's a guy on Middle America, and the only time he posts anything from black people is if it's a black Republican saying that there's no such thing as racism, that type of thing. So it made me go, okay, women are, okay, I see. So then when they see you in Albany and all the other women who are against abortion, they already have a category for you guys. Oh, you guys are you're a Gileadian. You know? So I'm like, oh, wow. And that's where I thought, oh, this is a wonderful piece of propaganda. But at the same time, I thought that truth was very well done. In order to oppress a group of people, even if they're a minority, you need members, influential members from that group to speak on your behalf. It's the reason why Margaret Sanger recruited W.E.B. Du Bois.
That's literally what I was just thinking.
Right? You know, people say, oh, Margaret Sanger, you know, she wasn't a racist. I mean, she talked about favored races, and she talked about, you know, human weeds and lower racial strata and all the rest of this stuff. But she wasn't a racist. Look, she hired W.E.B. Du Bois to be her spokesman for the Negro Project, of course. She said specifically that you need a black voice to quell the rebellious Negroes. That's literally the term that she used.
Michelle, yeah, I am definitely against abortion. I don't think that it's horrible for the child, but I also agree that it's terrible for the mother as well, because regardless, she still is participating in the destruction of her own child. And that's not natural to a mother to participate in something like that. I think that people can get confused, and I think that people can be in a particular place of pain and make bad decisions out of that pain. I do think that there's forgiveness for people that have done that, and that there is healing even beyond that. But I don't think that we should encourage any of our young women to put themselves or their children in that situation. I think that the support needs to increase all around, financially, emotionally. There's a lot of stability that comes from having a community, and I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done for women. And I'm even talking from my own experience that whenever I have a child, like, I have Vinny's support and I have the support of my family, but a lot of times when you're going through postpartum and everything that goes with it, it doesn't feel like it's enough. You actually feel like you need like a crew of women that understand where you're going through and have been through that. So I think that all that stuff needs to increase, and I'm hoping that with the reversing of Roe v. Wade, that it's going to, because we are in America, it is capitalism, so I'm hoping that the capitalist side of the competition side of, hey, there's a way to make money here. How can we set something up where, I'm just hoping that it's going to sweeten things a lot for moms, and that life will get easier in that sense for mothers. But yeah, I'm definitely against abortion completely.
Yeah, so speaking of like internalized self-hatred and then using that person as the voice box, here's a person that Margaret Sanger decided to head up her Negro Project. This is W.E.B. Du Bois. The massive ignorant Negroes still breed carelessly and disastrously, so that the increase among Negroes, even more than the increase among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit and least able to rear their children properly. That's the person that Miss Sanger decided to head up and be the voice box for her Negro Project. So the point is, anytime you have an evil institution or an evil person that's trying to get people to work against their own interests, you can find a person in the minority group who's so full of the internalized oppression and self-hatred that they want to completely disassociate themselves from the group because they don't want to be part of the oppressed group anymore. And so that's the exchange that gets made. And you see this a lot, particularly with one of the aunts. Her name is Aunt Lydia. And remember, the aunts run the house. They run the Marthas, the girls, etc. And you can see she has a deep disdain for women being independent, those sorts of things. She can't stand that. She has a deep desire for order, and she's almost maniacal when it comes to the order situation. But this Aunt Lydia person is a very, very interesting character.
See, with Aunt Lydia, what I noticed was when she was outside of that system, she took that girl underneath her wing to help her out.
Yes.
And when the girl was talking about how she was kind of being objectified and being treated poorly at her job, she was encouraging her to get out of that situation, basically like she was better than that. And then, but then, what was the event that happened that made her flip on that girl?
On which girl?
Remember, she was taking care of that girl. She did Christmas with that girl. She was taking care of her kid.
Well,
Something happened, and then she
tried to get romantic with that guy, and he rejected her because she was going too fast. And she ended up, so
and then she took it out on the girl.
She took it out on the girl.
But when you see her in Gilead, it seems like she can't be looked at as less. Like, I think that she felt inferior and stuff when he kind of rejected her advances.
Yeah.
And you see her she was strict with the girls, but then you saw her trying to kind of loosen up things and make life a little bit more tolerable. So much so that June asks her to kind of keep an eye out for her child.
Yeah, she
and
does.
Then she flips again when she almost loses her post, and then she goes completely wild on the girls, zapping them and going after everybody.
Yeah, Aunt Lydia.
It's about her.
Yeah, and it just looks to me like she didn't know how to manage her sexuality. And so it looks to me like she blamed her sexuality for her rejection. Because they went on a date, everything was going good, and then she pushed it overboard, and that's when the guy said, whoa, because he was very interested in her.
Yeah,
he just didn't want to sleep with her on night one.
Yeah.
So I think that experience,
she went crazy.
She blamed her own sexuality for her rejection, and then she looks at this woman, and she's like, oh, she's a single mom, and she wouldn't be in that predicament if she wasn't managing her sexual. So you just see how, like, where that internalized hatred for herself, the internalized misogyny came from. And again, I thought it was a very, very good. Hey, Cassia, what's up? Shout out to Cassia. I thought it was a very good look at. I don't think every quote right wing or even religious woman has this internalized hatred of women, but I do think a lot of them do, and I do see Aunt Lydia in some of the characters that we know locally.
Oh yeah.
I see a lot of Aunt Lydia, and it's terrifying to think, like, yo, this dude would absolutely have been a commander, would absolutely have loved to live in that environment where the wife can't say no and all this other stuff. Like, there are people when I'm like, yo, damn, look, I really truly believe that either A, this person would gladly be part of Gilead, or B, this person wouldn't, like, move to join Gilead, but if Gilead happened, he wouldn't fight against it. And
I feel like that there's some people that would be like, I'm going to low-key join it so that way I can have some of those restrictions put on women. But they don't want to necessarily take it to the extreme. But you see in the show that it doesn't matter. Like, they're going to come after you. You have to go along with the party line or you will lose parts of your body.
Literally, you'll lose parts of your body. Okay, so the scene that made me stop watching the show, literally, I didn't watch the show for another 2 years after that, maybe 3. Because that was right when we got married. Mm-hmm. So,
and I couldn't watch it by myself because honestly, it was an extremely stressful show to me.
Too
like
close to home to me because he read a Bible verse at the beginning.
Yeah, that was just
so it was just too much.
You just said that so fast. Yeah,
it was
exactly. It was
It was too much for me as far as like because. Yeah. Okay. So here is the verse. I'm just saying. You know how dudes have that talk. You know the stereotypical dude on the shotgun and all this other shit. You know, by the yard. Like, I'm not doing any of that dumb shit, but if anybody tries to treat my daughters like that, bro, that's one thing I'll never understand about certain people. Like, I'll never understand it, but okay. Anyway, so this is a verse, okay? It's in Genesis chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of his sister. She said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." So Jacob is married to these 2 women, Rachel and Leah. Rachel's the hot one. Leah, not so much. He loves Rachel, but he basically had to take, it was a double or nothing, he had to take it, long story. And Leah's having
well,
all
he
the
was
kids.
Forced into it
Leah,
and tricked.
We're going to talk about it in a second. Leah had all the kids. Rachel didn't have any kids. So she's saying, "Give me kids or die." Jacob goes, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" It says, then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my servant," my slave. It's actually slave. "Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. And Rachel said, "God has vindicated me." Okay, so
it's crazy because even in the scripture, like in the Bible, she gave him as a wife. Where in Gilead, they were still just a handmaiden, and then they were going to get shipped off to somebody else.
Well, where did it say as a wife?
It said, then she said, "Here's Bilhah, my servant, sleep with her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife.
Yeah,
do you think that just means?
Yeah, I just think that's a Hebrew euphemism for that purpose, because if you look through the rest of the scripture, they're not really mentioned as the mothers of these people, but I hear you.
Oh, okay.
But that is the passage in that's what they read, and then they hold this girl down and rape her. Okay?
Was that the passage?
Say again?
I thought that there was something about the knees.
Yeah, it was KJV, whatever.
Oh, okay.
But, so this happens multiple times in the Old Testament, particularly in Genesis, where the girl, primary mom can't conceive, here's a slave, go have sex with her, then she'll basically be a forced surrogate, okay? And so they use this as a sort of biblical way of solving the fertility problem. Now, this is one of those situations where this is a clear and obvious misreading of Scripture. How do you know that? That's just your interpretation. No, it's very simple. We've got records of church history. Just show us one community that even practiced this. Show us one. It didn't happen. Christianity was against this stuff. I mean, by the time Jesus showed up, Jesus says, you can't even look at a woman with lust in your heart, much less hold her down and rape her and all the rest of it. You go, well, what's happening? This was a common ancient Near Eastern practice. And the people that God was working with were real, actual flesh and blood human beings. One of the actual things that I love about Scripture is that the Bible sets up a hero, and you're like, this guy's going to save the world, because there's a prediction that somebody's going to come and save the world.
Yeah.
And then God goes out of his way to show you their flaws.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
So in the same book of Genesis, you have Lot. Here's one of the things that is so fascinating to me about Gilead and the entire situation. Okay? So Lot has 2 daughters, right?
Yep.
And they live in Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom and Gomorrah gets completely and totally destroyed because they were overfed, had ease, did not care for the poor and widow. The poor and the widow were haughty and arrogant, and they committed an abomination. So I destroyed them when I saw it. That's what Ezekiel says. That's why God says he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so Sodom and Gomorrah gets completely destroyed, okay? So then look what happened. So this is again in the same book of Genesis, just 10 chapters before. Why aren't the Gileadians doing this? Check this out, guys. Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day the older daughter said to the younger daughter, our father is old and there's no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through our father. That night they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him, and he was not aware of it when she laid down or when she got up. That means that Lot's daughters got him drunk and sexually assaulted him because they were afraid of a baby shortage crisis.
Right.
Okay? They just saw the entire world get blown up, and so they're thinking, we're it. So the only people left to populate the world is us, and all we got is dad, and they were hanging out in Sodom, so they were obviously sexual perverts themselves. They get their dad drunk, which means they know that he would be unwilling to participate. They get him drunk, and then they sexually assault him, and that's how they engender the pregnancy. So if Gilead was being consistent, that would mean that this would also be a ritual. Right? Here's another one. Here's another one that's really fascinating.
Gross.
I just quoted Genesis 30, right? I just quoted Genesis 30 because in Genesis 30, what's his face? Rebecca says to Rachel, Rebecca says, "Go sleep with my handmaid." So that's Genesis 30. Then there's another story in Genesis 30 that's conveniently missing in Handmaid's Tale. Check this out, guys. This is unbelievable. So, Leah, on her property, there's mandrakes. Now, mandrakes in the ancient Near East were thought to be, sort of a natural sort of sexual stimulant, okay?
Oh, I thought it was to make you fertile.
It was more about sexual. It was around both, basically. You would want your guy to be sexually stimulated. That increases your chances of having children.
Yeah, I thought it was for the woman.
And it's like an aphrodisiac.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Okay, so she says, "Hey, I want these mandrakes," and so Rachel said, "He can sleep with you tonight in turn for your son's mandrakes." So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. She said, "You must sleep with me.
Jesus.
I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah. She became pregnant and bore a 5th son. So here, right above in Genesis 30, you had this crazy thing where the woman says, sleep with this woman and have a kid, which is very interesting because once again, this oppressive system is actually being run by women, not initiated by men.
Yeah.
But in the second half of the same chapter, you also see how the man himself gets sexually exploited. So you have 2 cases, maybe 3, of men getting sexually assaulted by either their wives or their children in the ancient world. So that's not God saying, yes, I want all the daughters to get their fathers drunk. Obviously not. God is not saying, oh, I want you to marry 2 women and then you bargain for the guy's body based on what plants. This guy's got some really good indica, so we're gonna no. What's happening in Genesis is not a prescription. What's happening in Genesis is a description of how fucked up we have strayed. You started with a man and a woman in the garden, loving each other, loving God, being completely open with each other, to now you've got 2 women, 3 women, people are handing each other off for mandrakes. You got this guy getting drunk, sleeping with his daughters using him as, it's meant to show you, wow, humanity is really fucked up. It is not meant to show you this is a pattern you should follow. Mm-hmm. But the men of Gilead, use this text to justify what they're doing to these women. Yeah. And yes,
but I hear what you're saying. When you're seeing all those other 3 examples, why didn't they initiate those in Gilead? Right. Why did they choose the one that,
Right. Why did they choose that? Why didn't they say that the daughters could do that? Why and what kind of relationship? This is fascinating. What type of relationship did men and women have where a woman can go up to the man in the ancient world and say, "That's what I'm saying. I hired you for tonight."
I thought that was pretty weird.
That's an ancient Near Eastern. Yeah. Feel how you want to feel about Genesis. That's a pretty. That to me tells me they were just recording what actually happened, because that doesn't belong in the ancient world. I'm sorry.
It's crazy too because, obviously I've read that story a bunch of times, but I guess because it was the guy, I didn't really realize how weird that was. Yeah. I was too busy thinking, wow, I'm surprised Rachel went along with all this.
But again, one of the things that is absolutely fascinating to me about this show is that the main character, June, continuously prays. And when one of her friends dies, she does a little funeral service and things like that. June never loses her spirituality, at least in the first 4 seasons. She never becomes a raging atheist, says there's no God. June is able to tell the difference between the real God and the God of the Gileadians, which I tip my hat to the writers of the show, because those are not conflated. Mm-hmm. They have a version of God, but June also has a version of God that listens to her, understands her, that type of thing, that she cries out to when she's in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I also thought that the authors of this story did such a good job of saying, look, spirituality doesn't only belong to these types of people.
Yeah, I liked that it was the same phrases. Like, she would use the same phrase, and there was sometimes where she would say it, and it just had that Gilead feel to it. And then there was other times that she would say it, and it just had such a sweetness to it. Yeah. Same phrase.
Yeah. And so that whole practice is kind of what makes Gilead tick. And because of that, the birth rates in Gilead skyrocket, and all the rest of it. One of the things that's fascinating to me about this show is that it is an extremely gendered show. Men are men, women are women. That's it. They have their roles, they have the ways that they operate, and that's it. And I thought that was fascinating because of the conversation that many modern feminists are having about the trans movement. Trans people are nowhere to be found in this world, in this universe. Now, a person could argue there are no trans people because, that completely, does away with the entire concept of having a birth rate in the first place. If you got people fooling around with gender, you could assume that they just killed all the trans people. It's very possible in that universe, but they're not even mentioned. And I thought that was fascinating. considering that it is clear
It's true.
that the authors of the show picked up on Trump and these other things. So that means they were aware, and they alluded to Trump. One of them said, like, make this place right again, basically, which is a form of MAGA. So they're aware of the current conversations in the zeitgeist, and that to me means they purposely left out trans people in this story. And I think at a subliminal level, I've been talking about this on the Middle America channel, I think there's a real, in my view, growing resentment from women, biological women, against the trans community. And I think it's very fascinating that lesbians and gays are mentioned in the show. They're called gender traders, and we'll talk about that in a second. But as far as the trans question, they're completely left out of the book. There's no representation for them whatsoever. I mean, of the show. I don't know about the book, but of the show. And I thought that was very, very interesting. I agree it's based on a book written in the 80s, but if you look at the show, one of the cops had ice on the back. That was obviously a Trumpian reference when they said we have to make Gilead great again. That's obviously a MAGA reference. So I understand that it was written in the 80s, but the show has been obviously updated to deal with the issues that we're looking at today, and there's no trans people there. I thought that was interesting. I really did. Maybe in season 5 there will be, but I did want to point that out. It was an extremely gendered environment, and trans people are not there. Yeah. Which leads to the whole turf question, trans exclusionary radical feminists. If you would have asked Margaret Atwood in 1985 about the trans question, would she have a 2022 progressive answer? I don't think she would. I think J.K. Rowling pretty much speaks to the attitude of what feminists would think about that in the 1980s. I think what you're seeing from Rowling right now is she doesn't want women in, she doesn't go along with the whole trans women or women thing. She's like, no, you guys are whatever, but you're not us. We're something else. And that's, she's been completely blackballed and all the rest of it. But I think if you asked any feminist in 1985, that's how they would have responded to the trans question. So yes, even though, so I thought that was a very fascinating twist. You look concerned. What are you concerned about?
I never even realized it. Until you brought it up, I didn't realize that they went unrepresented in the show.
Yeah.
And I guess I just kind of put it under the category because they said the gender traders. So.
Right. Gender traders are
yes.
lesbians.
I know, but it sounds.
Well, I just wanted to explain to the audience.
Oh. Yeah. It just sounds like it would include, but you're right. I mean, yeah. Yikes.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really that was a very, very fascinating observation that I made relative to that. Okay, now the promised land in this type of oppressive environment is Canada, and Canada is presented as this like refuge, like Mount Zion. If you cross over the border to Canada, they don't tell you to do anything. They'll say, hey, this is the next step if that's all right with you. I don't know if you recognize that every time a Canadian says something to one of the to the women, it's always if that's all right with you, if that's all right, because they're trying to establish, look, they value consent in Canada, because to a lot of modern progressives, consent is like the ultimate value. And obviously, in a Gileadian context, consent would be very, very important because literally they were systemically raped by these people. So anyway, so Canada gets presented as sort of like this promised land, whatever. And like I said, I just thought it was over the top and ridiculous. I just thought that, it's especially considering, who's currently running Canada, a completely cis white male entitled obvious racist, obviously a power hungry individual, Mr. Justin Trudeau, who sent his jackbooted, quasi, fascist stormtroopers to knock down that poor native lady, broke her hips, all types of shit. Remember that Native American lady? Remember I showed you that video of the horse?
Oh
and
my
she got, they broke her hip, all that shit. Man, fuck Justin Trudeau.
I forgot about that.
So yeah, like the whole worship of Canada, I thought that was ridiculous. I could not. I mean, whatever. But anyway, you know, the whole point is getting to Canada. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the point. Now,
I think like when I saw that part and they were brought in and some of them had to cross water to get there, and when that scene was happening, that was a little bit troubling because like you felt the relief of crossing the Canadian border and being like taken into the arms of the Canadians, and then to hear that like, you know, that we had Jews that crossed and tried to come in here and we sent them back, and we're doing, you know, kids in cages, and so there was all that stuff. Like it was just hard to see, like here we are watching this show where we absolutely understand that when somebody is in crisis they need to have a place to go, and that we have not opened our arms to those people, but that we have closed them out of here, and that a lot of us have done it in the name of fear. And so that was a little bit like when you're watching these characters and they're coming in, like just the idea of sending them back would be like, oh my gosh. But I don't know. That hurts.
And just so you guys know, because people have been saying, hey, the book was written in the 80s. Yeah, that's true. But here's what the show's producer says. And I just found this. I hadn't even found this yet. But Seasons 4 of The Handmaid's Tale reflects the journey ahead of the U.S. after the Trump administration, the show's executive producer says. So they were clearly trying to make statements about the Trump administration as the show was going on, as well as after.
Can I have the charger?
Obviously, the intention there. So anyway, you go to Canada, and that's where you escape.
Yeah.
So you know, I thought
and they had the Medicare for all.
Well, yeah, I mean they had medical and dental, which is true. I mean, you know, sure. But Canada is not like this bastion of liberty and freedom as Mr. Trudeau has just demonstrated. Obviously not. But so that's pretty much it. This is where we're at now. Now, here are some of the fascinating aspects of this show as well. There was another way in which women were being sexually exploited in Gilead, which was completely different. It was the diametric opposite of what you saw on the surface. So one day, Fred, who's like the commander, takes June to this underground club or whatever, and it's populated by basically nothing but the women are just there for sex.
Yeah.
But it's not sex as in we're going to procreate and raise children. It's just pure lecherous sex.
Yeah, and they're not dressed.
I walked when they did the initial scene. Yeah. And he brought her to the club, and then they started. Girls are starting to walk around topless, all this shit. I just left. And when I came back, you were describing a little bit of what was going on there, but it wasn't ritualized. There was no religious air to it. It was just craven. Just
why did
sexuality.
You leave it? It bothered you?
I don't like. I feel like I understand. Like by that time in the show, it's like middle of season 2 or something like that. I understand these people are violating these women sexually. Blah blah blah. I don't understand. It was just like when we were watching Cuties. Like we thought Cuties was good and it's instructive for young girls, but why did they have to go that far? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I just felt like, what's the point of depicting all this stuff in all this detail? It was just a little bit too much for me. Because of the powerlessness. It made me feel like I was one of those guys in the show. I can't do anything. You know what I'm saying? So you're just watching all this happen. There's nothing you could do. It was just, and perhaps that's part of my male privilege, because women have to live it. Mm-hmm. So I don't even want to see it, but they have to live it. So perhaps that was just part of my privilege, where I'm like, oh, I don't want to look at that as part of my whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that part was really, really fascinating, because it really showed, Jesus had this where he says that you guys are externally righteous, but inside you guys are crooked as hell. You're full of every kind of greed, lust, whatever. He said you're full of it. A lot of people thought that the Pharisees at the time were great religious people who meticulously follow the law. No, that's not true. Inside, it was hell inside of those guys. And so the Jezebel sort of club type scene environment was just raw, complete, you know,
and
as
it went
Candy's
again,
pointed out, just complete and total male bullshit hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Specifically male religious bullshit hypocrisy.
Right, because that was against the rules of Gilead for them even to have that. Right. Because again, you weren't even supposed to do anything with the girl aside from during the time of the ceremony, and that was it. In fact, I mean, people lost limbs because they did other things on top of that with the girls. So when June goes into there with him, she asks him like, wait, how is this even possible? Because it just didn't look like the rest of Gilead. And he basically said, well, I don't remember his exact words, but I got from what he said that it was basically like, well, you know, they have an understanding that we're men and that this is what we need.
Correct. Which if you talk to evangelical guys, when you get past the veneer of that, it's basically like, hey, we're men. And
so when I was a teenager, I had a conversation because there was a man that was studying to be a pastor, and he was going to be taking over a local church, and he was with his sons, and we were all like at this mall, and he was like, the father said to the sons, oh my gosh, like, look at that girl, look at her short skirt, like, hey, look at that. And so then his boys are looking and he's looking, and I felt extremely uncomfortable, very angry and frustrated, because I'm just sitting there watching this whole thing taking place. And you were supposed to look at the father like he was something special because he was going to be the next pastor, but at the same time, like, he was doing this, and I was so confused by this behavior. And then when we left, I left with the sons, and I was like, why was that even happening? Like, why are you guys being encouraged to lust after this girl? And they were like, well, you know, we're men, and that's what men do. And I was like, well, and then I brought up, there's a scripture in the Bible, Job, famous guy. It was Job, wasn't it?
Yeah,
or was it
made a covenant with my eyes.
Yeah, okay, I thought it was Job. Anyway, he says that he made a covenant with his eyes not to look with lust on a woman. And so I brought that verse up to him because, again, I was naive, and I thought because we were all Christians that if you brought up the Bible to them that they would be like, oh, well, you know, I didn't realize that. And there would be some sort of a change. Well, when I brought the verse, they said, well, that's Job, so... And I'm like, so Job was a guy, and you're saying that only guys can understand this, and only guys, that this is how things function. And Job went out of his way to make a covenant with his eyes not to do that. Yeah. And that it was completely disregarded. The conversation was extremely frustrating, and it never went anywhere.
And among, you know, this brand of evangelicalism, it's the whole every man's battle thing, where it's like, oh, every guy is struggling with this every single day. It's just not true. You can't even find that in the Bible. Mm-hmm. There's no long extended discussion about, oh, this is something that men struggle with every day, and it's ridiculous. Why would God put something like, you know, enjoy the breasts of your wife, the wife of your youth? The Song of Solomon is extremely graphic, even though it's laden full of euphemistic language. I mean, it's pretty graphic, and it's about a monogamous relationship between this guy and his lover, and there's mutuality and back and forth and fighting and drama, and the whole thing is around these two and their sexual tension. That's the entire book is about sexual tension and orgasms and the endorphin rush and it's all there. Mm-hmm. It's, you know, the Jews won't even let the guys read it until they're bar mitzvah. Right. You know, the Hasidim anyway, the Hasidic Jews. So it's very fascinating the kind of the brand of sexuality that the Gileadian evangelicals produce, where it's this very, like, sex is something very fearful. If you look at one thing, it'll fuck you up for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to look away from it again, because every man is a recovering porn addict, and blah 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 blah. And I mean, I've got secular friends who I would consider godless, who that just wasn't their thing. Mm-hmm. When they were on their free time, their mind straight off to violence and how to be a more efficient violence applicator. And I knew a lot of dudes like that. And of course, we also knew, you know, you're going away from your house a lot, you're going away from home a lot. Yeah, I also knew dudes that, you know, risked their lives to get in there. So I get it. That's not the majority. I don't think most men are like that. Most men, honestly, from what I've seen in Gilead, most people are the weak men that would sit there and let this shit happen and say there's nothing I could do. I mean, this Luke guy is living in Canada.
For 5 years.
He knows right across the border is his wife and his daughter, and he stays in Canada.
For 5 years before she starts making her way over to him.
That's why I'm telling you. That's why I'm telling you guys. Listen, girls, listen. Feel how you want to feel, but if a guy is a beta male and you're doing everything, and he I'm telling you, it's dangerous. It's just, I'm telling you, it's just as toxic as the drunk guy is gonna come home and beat the hell out of you. The beta male, trust me, he's soft as hell, and you are the only person he will ever fight.
Yeah.
That's the thing about soft dudes, man. Is like the only person they'll ever really get busy with is you. Like there is a particular individual. I think it's soft as hell. Had a lot to say, and then as soon as your brother showed up, he didn't even want to get outside the house. That was wise too.
Radio
wise.
silent.
Wise.
Radio silence.
Very wise. But the point is, like, that guy to me is the absolute worst man in the show. I hope they kill him. I really do. I hope he dies. I don't care what. I don't care what happens. I want him off the show. Honestly, he's the worst. I could have tolerated. There are people that died in the show that I would have that deserve to die, and deserve to die the way they died. But in my opinion, he deserves to die. It's completely unforgivable to me that he, as a man, would sit there knowing a couple yards across the border, there's your wife and daughter, and you're sitting in your nice little, you know, apartment.
When he had crossed over,
newspaper clippings and crying.
yeah,
here, bro.
and he had like. He had a coffee for him, and he had a coffee for the other girl, and he was bringing up the coffees. I was like, what is happening? Like, how are you not so traumatized that your wife is over the border getting raped constantly? You're just going to sit around drinking coffees? I don't know. That was just weird to me.
Your wife is getting assaulted on a daily basis, having other dudes' children. You're just sitting there doing nothing.
But then it kind of like,
protect your own skin,
like they're not necessarily making him look like a bad guy.
Oh, I know.
But at the same time,
that's because he's being written by women. Honestly, that's why. He's portrayed as a sympathetic figure, but to me, he's probably easily one of the most corrupt people in the story. Go ahead.
I'm having a hard time to see him as a sympathetic figure because I've been frustrated him from the beginning. But I feel like he doesn't have he has a different level of disrespect for women. So his first wife, he's gonna leave her because she won't birth children to him, and then he's gonna chew her out on the phone for even trying to say, hey, like this is mine, that's my husband. And then when June is in that situation, like I understood that when he escaped out of Gilead, I was like, okay, well, he has to get out so he can make a plan and he can go back, and he has nothing. I mean, what is he going to do? Sure. So I was fine with him escaping out of there. But then when he's like walking around with his little beanie on his head with his coffee, I was like, okay, now shit's getting too far. And then he just left her there, and 5 years passes, and when he actually meets up with her, like June is apologizing to him for not bringing the kid. And I thought, well, that's very instructive. Why does she think that she has the need to apologize to him? Like straight off the bat, he should have been apologizing to her for leaving her in that situation and still leaving his daughter in that situation.
Terrible.
So I guess the writers, I think that they did a poor job, but maybe that's because of my experiences and being around you for so long that it's like I can't even look at him and feel sympathetic toward him. I look at him and I'm like, wow, seriously?
Yeah, it's because you've been around our subculture.
I think that's what it is.
You'd have been fine with that before.
You're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, when shit happened in the real world.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, those are the worst people on the planet to me. Those cowardly men are the worst. That's why they end up in hell at the end of the Bible. Because the liars, the sexual, immoral, the sorcerers, and the cowardly all will have their place in the lake of fire. That's why. So, which is funny because Fred is sexually immoral and Luke is cowardly, so they're both going to the lake of fire, inshallah. But one of the things that really got to me was the emphasis is on what could happen in the near dystopian future, but they miss out on. They highlight it, but they don't talk about the form of slavery that is happening to women, namely the sex trafficking. So the Jezebel type scene is sort of like oh, look how horrible these guys are. They're not even really that religious, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about social commentary, there are way more sex trafficked women. That's actually happening in the real world, where girls are actually trapped. That's happening right now, and it is being promoted by other women. And so that to me was like a major miss in the show. It's like, I understand, like, you've got this, hey, this could happen and this is a terrible situation, but we've already got an entire industry that's already happening, and it's pretty terrible. I did a discussion one time with a girl who, was a feminist. She called herself a feminist, and the debate we had
is the goal.
The debate we had was on the morality of sex work, and I was saying that we should discontinue sex work, that sex work should be illegal, and that we should adopt the Nordic model and prosecute the exploiters, meaning the Johns and the pimps.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my perspective. Her perspective was that we should release the restrictions on all three phases of the game, which would be the pimp, the woman, and the John. And I was explaining to her that New Zealand did that, and the minute New Zealand did that, they popped immediately on the U.S. State Department's Trafficking Persons Report as a destination country for sex traffickers.
Yep. And
so during the cross-examination section, I asked her a very specific question.
Prepare yourself.
This to me was mind-boggling, and kudos to her for honestly answering the question.
Yeah.
But during the cross-examination, you guys will not believe this, but there are literally, like I said, I named one of these things and she didn't look surprised. Like, I thought I was going to have to validate the name of the site, but when I said it, she looked like she knew what I was talking about. There are literally sites that are dedicated to abusing women. Literally, the term abuse is in the site itself. Okay? So I asked her this question during the cross-sex. You guys know how I get down during the cross-sex. And I give kudos to her because she answered honestly.
And I'll tell you, when you hear from the girls that have done that type of porn and then have gotten out of it, it's absolutely heartbreaking to hear their side of that abuse.
So, like, check this out here.
That abuse is the goal of that channel?
Yes.
Do you believe that should be legal? That women should be used on camera for men's enjoyment?
Yes.
Okay, so I asked her that abuse. So if the site is named abuse, then abuse is the goal of the channel. She said yes. And I said, okay, so should that be legal? Should we continue to have sites where abuse is the stated goal of the site? Now, you guys are going to have to turn this up a little bit, but I've got it up at max. I'm going to play it again so you guys can hear it.
That abuse is the goal of that channel?
Yes.
Do you believe that should be legal? That women should be used on camera for men's enjoyment?
Yes.
Okay, so you think that should be legal? Women should be abused on camera for men? Yes. Okay, so that's happening in this country, and literally across the world. I'll show you guys across the world in a second. And one of the things that was really fascinating about the Jezebels is the women are only there for sex, but you know what never gets mentioned anytime the Jezebels get brought up? You know what never gets mentioned? Babies. You never hear the Jezebels or the men talking about them being pregnant. But they're literally having sex every day. Think about what that means. So abortion is never brought up in the show, especially in the context of the Jezebels. But just do some logical deduction. These girls, they get the Jezebel
I thought it
group.
was the ones that were infertile.
No, Moira was there. Moira was there, and Moira was a handmaid.
You're right.
So if you were
Oh my gosh.
if you misbehaved really badly, they would send you off to be a Jezebel. But oddly enough, you never hear about pregnancy with the Jezebels.
Yeah.
Never. Why? I believe it's because they're just killing. They're just They're just killing.
What?
Because
No, that wouldn't even make any sense. They take the kids from them. They need those kids.
No, because the kid would be a sign that they actually went off against the stated rules. So the kid could not live in that context because it would get them all killed. Because those guys got punished if they broke the rules of Gilead. They got punished. Remember, one of the guys got his arm chopped off.
I know, yeah.
So they had this entire stable of women. They're having sex with these women. These women have multiple partners every single night. Not one of them gets pregnant, and they came from the handmaiden group. So how is that possible? Again, to me, that indicates the kind of fantasy world a lot of these men live in, where they could just have unprotected, wild, nasty, crazy sex, and then they won't have to deal with the child because they can simply get rid of the child. And so, if you think about this, look at this discussion. Now, look, I'm not making a comment here necessarily about arguing for or against abortion politically. I'm just talking about how abortion works in the context of sex trafficking, because I do think this is important. What we're watching is a pimp who is pretending that he's got a 14-year-old prostitute, and he's going to this lady in Planned Parenthood. This lady has since been fired. He's going to this lady in Planned Parenthood, and they're asking advice as to how to handle a situation where the girl gets pregnant, and he's made it clear that this girl is a sex worker, and he's made it clear that she's 14 years of age. Okay? So that's the context. Watch this. And again, I think this is important to establish the connection between sex work and the abortion industry. We continue.
And then a question: if it comes down that they do need an abortion, how long till they can be sexually active again?
Minimum 2 weeks.
Minimum 2 weeks.
Minimum 2 weeks.
Do you maybe have any suggestions about what else they could do in the time? Because
I mean, they still got to make money, you know?
Yeah. Waist up.
Waist up.
Waist up.
Okay.
Or just be that extra action walking by.
So this woman knew this girl was 14 years old, and her pimp is there, and they were just talking about getting her an abortion, and then she says, well, what am I supposed to do? We still got to make money. She says, waist up. You do whatever you need to do, waist up, or be the extra thing walking by, sway your hips, whatever it is, for 2 weeks after you have this abortion. So the only reason I'm bringing that up is because the what do you call it? The Jezebel thing was just a very insane, fascinating angle of a situation that's happening right now that, for whatever reason, was not looked upon as badly as what the evangelicals were doing. But this is this is where the secularists would come in. I don't believe any of my atheist friends would ever take part in the Gilead and the ceremony, but I definitely believe they would take part in that. And the reason I'm saying that is because I have done moderated debates where I talk about the Farley report, where Miss Farley tells us that the condition of women in these situations in sex trafficking. And so it's a pretty depressing situation, but I've talked to people and I've showed the data. The data is absolutely clear relative to how people function in these sex trafficking situations. And so here it is right here. And when I did my debate, this with Kat, the woman that you saw earlier, who said it's okay for women to be abused on camera for the sexual gratification of men. Check this out. So Thailand, Turkey, United States, and Zambia, inquiring about the current and lifetime history of sexual and physical violence. We found, again, this is Farley. She's not a Christian. This is just her expertise. We found that prostitution was multi-traumatic. 71% were physically assaulted in prostitution. 63% were raped. 89% of those respondents wanted to escape prostitution but did not have other options for survival. A total of 75% had been homeless at some point in their lives. 68% met the criteria for PTSD. Severity of PTSD symptoms was strongly associated with a number of different types of lifetime sexual and physical violence. Our findings contradict common myths about prostitution. The assumption that street prostitution is the worst type of prostitution, that prostitution of men and boys is different from prostitution of women and girls, that most of those in prostitution freely consent to it, etc., etc., etc. I have read this report in detail to a lot of my secularist friends, and I said, how do you know that that porn you're watching isn't that? Oh, they were consenting. Well, wait a second. If I have no other financial recourse, is it a choice? Right. So, especially these women, if you talk about these women who've left pornography, I played an extended clip. I'm not going to play it again because it's too much. But it was one of these big, famous porn stars or whatever, talking about how hyper feminist she was and porn was empowering. I played a clip where that same girl was talking about how she showed up, the guy was twice her age, her manager, pimp, did not tell her that the age of this person, because he knew that she wouldn't even went to the set. But once you go onto the set, it's basically understood that if you don't follow through with it, you're going to get blackballed. So she consented. So one of the points of my debate was, how can you call that consent when you have extenuating factors that put you in a situation where you have no other choice? So I thought that was, I thought it was well done, but that is an issue that's happening now. That's not something that's going to happen in some dystopian future. Yeah. If evangelicals take over, that's happening right now.
Oh, I see. That's a good point.
It's a crisis happening now, and who do you hear at the forefront of perpetuating this nonsense? It's usually leftist women who grew up in complete privilege and are like, we need to have sex worker, blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about legalizing all three phases of sex work because they think they're helping women. No, you're not. The Nordic model helps women. When you legalize all three phases, it turns a place into a destination country for pimps. It benefits men. It does not benefit women. That's clear. 89% of them around the world would be doing something else if they had the financial means to. So I thought that was very well done. I just wish that they would have made the bad guys more honest. Here's another thing. This is from Dr. Lederer. Dr. Lederer focuses specifically on sex trafficking, but she focuses on and this was on the another U.S. State Department source that I pulled this from. Here's what she has to say. The prevalence of forced abortion is an especially disturbing trend in sex trafficking. Prior research noted that forced abortions were a reality for many victims of sex trafficking outside of the United States. At least one study noted forced abortion and domestic trafficking. The survivors in this study similarly reported that they often did not freely choose the abortions they had while being trafficked. Okay? And it goes on and on and on. Abortion is absolutely necessary. In order, somebody else said maybe they were sterilized. That's possible. It is part and parcel to a successful sex trafficking ring. The abortion industry absolutely has. That's Dr. Lederer, and she goes on to say, listen, I'm not part of your pro-life, pro-choice discussion because I don't care about that. My goal is women and what they're going through. I
just think if they were sterilized that they would have put that in the show. Because that's an invasive thing, another invasive thing that they're doing to those women. And a lot of people don't view abortion as something that's invasive. So, and I would think that the mindset of the women that wrote this series would have a problem with forced sterilization, but not forced abortion. That's just my take. I just think I think
she'd have a problem with forced abortion. I think she'd have
in that situation.
Yeah, 100%. The person who wrote the story, Margaret Atwood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Look, all pro-choicers will say that they're not pro-abortion.
So do you think that it was just a flaw in the story?
What do you mean?
That they didn't say what was going on with those children.
The potential children of the Jezebels,
you
mean? Yeah, I think that she just wanted. I think the
It's just a plot hole?
the entire Jezebel thing was made to say these guys are not really convicted religious people. They're giant hypocrites. My point is that's true, but what she did though was expose something about how women are being utilized.
Yeah.
Hyper evangelical men believe that the only purpose of a woman is her sexuality so she can produce a child. But hypersexual men on the other side, though, believe that the woman's only value is her sexuality to give them sexual pleasure. So it's still the Handmaid's Tale, either way you take it. That to me is something that's really important to point out. And again, what is more rampant in our current age? What's more rampant in our current age is the Jezebel stuff. It's not the Handmaid stuff. I'm sorry, but that's a fact. That's a fact. Women are getting disappeared and trafficked every single day. They're getting herded into abortion clinics every single day. And they have nice, liberal, bourgeoisie, white women who've never had to work a day in their life advocating for sex worker rights by putting women in a situation where they're going to get extremely trafficked. And so I think that's a blind spot that Margaret Atwood has. I think that the Jezebel thing was just a device to say, look how hypocritical these guys are. It was well played. But it didn't touch on the fact that our society, that we have an industry that makes multi-billions of dollars a year with the exploitation of female body, female presentation, female energy, only for the sexual gratification of men, mostly, who are mostly the consumers of these women via pornography. Because I want you to understand, we're consuming people in pornography. They're the product.
Right.
As one of the ex sex workers said, she said, at least if you're working at McDonald's, you're not the meat, which I thought was a very, that's a particularly crazy. But where are the mainstream women fighting against sex trafficking? Where are they? Where are they in TYT? When was the last time you've heard any woman center this topic?
Yeah.
I've seen Anna Kasparian yell and scream and fight over the ability to kill a child, but I've never seen her yell and scream and fight about how many women are getting trafficked every year, which again goes to the point that these structures cannot stay in place unless you have female participation. And I'm sorry, but the vast majority of the, quote, progressive left is able to center female voices, and there's none of them that are on the roster right now that are bringing this up as an issue, bringing up pornography as an issue. Most of the time when these people are talking about pornography, they're trying to be edgy and say, yeah, women want to do this and we shouldn't judge them and blah, 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 blah. When in reality, the numbers are telling us these people are trapped in this system. So anyway, I thought the Jezebel thing was important, but that was a major issue there, is that we are living in Gilead already. That's happening globally. That's happening in America. Yeah. And abortion is one of the main tools that's used by these people all across the planet, according to the experts in the field.
It hides a lot of evidence.
According to the experts in the field, that's what's happening. So, now here is the biggest surprise to me about this show, and the reason why, if I was a woman, I would be completely offended at this show. There's a scene in which one of the girls gets pushed to her limit so bad that she takes her baby, because what happens is when you get pregnant, all that stuff, you deliver the baby and then you hand it off to the wife of the commander. Okay?
They're able to stay with them until they're weaned. But then once they're weaned, they're taken away from them.
Yeah. Okay? And they take the baby away. And somehow this girl had gotten her baby back, and she was at the top of this bridge. And
what happened was she was able to stay with the baby till it was weaned. Well, it was coming to the end of that amount of time, and she thought, because she was doing all this extra stuff for the commander, that he was going to take her and run off with her, and they were going to have a life together with their child.
Right.
And that was not what was happening. She was going to be sent away from the home, and she was going to have to leave her daughter behind, and that's when she was melting down. So she finds herself on this bridge.
Yeah, she finds herself on this bridge, and she's gonna kill herself.
And the baby. She's jumping with the baby.
And the baby. She's like, I can't raise, because it was a girl, right? We can't raise her in this crazy
Right.
environment
Yeah.
with these people. And June goes there and basically says you can't do this to her, blah blah blah, and talks her out of it. So she gives the baby back, and she jumps anyway, but she ends up surviving. And this girl, one of the themes of the show was that June also conceived in that context, not from Fred, but her head mistress Serena brought her to this other guy, one of the eyes, and the guy ends up having sex with her. She has no say in the matter. He raped her, but she got pregnant. Here's one of the craziest things about this show. There is no hostility to the babies.
Mm-hmm.
So her oldest son had died in the show.
Yeah, you're right. His name was
Right?
Nick.
The girl that was going to kill herself, her oldest son had died in the show. So the only other kid she had was this kid that was conceived by rape. And it's the same thing with the main character. The main character has a daughter that was taken from her, but then out of this rape comes this other child, and there are multiple times when she and the other women say that the child is the reason they keep living.
Mm-hmm.
And when June has to make real serious decisions, it is the baby that she makes the decision for.
I mean, really, that's why all the women ended up putting their lives on the line, is for the children.
Right. Well, think. All of these kids were conceived in sexual assault. And yet, instead of being a traumatic, they have to carry their rapist baby, they're so traumatized, it actually almost universally works in the opposite direction. The kid ends up being their only source of hope and life and beauty, and the kid ends up giving them a reason to fight. Mm-hmm. June makes a statement she would have given up if it weren't for her kid. There's actually a part where she gives up, and then it's the kid that makes her snap out of it. So it's so fascinating that when you talk about this question of abortion and how when the supposed right to abortion was taken away, it wasn't in the Roe v. Wade decision, but let's go with it. The fact that, this right to abortion was taken from us, that's the Handmaid's Tale. And what's the first thing they say after that? The next thing they say is the next thing you know, they're going to want to make us carry our rapist baby. But the baby
the entire show
is the only sort. That's the reason all these women are fighting to survive.
Mm-hmm.
It's what motivated Serena to get her finger cut off. Because remember, June goes to Serena and says, "Listen, we have a daughter.
Yeah.
You want her to grow up in this horrible, fucked up environment?" And so Serena gets up in front of everybody and says, "We need to let the girls read." Mm-hmm. Because she wants to change Gilead for the sake of this rape baby. It is a fascinating whole. It's almost like the author/authors could not outrun either the way God created women or evolutionary biology. I don't care either way. Like at the end of the day, you're still a woman with a maternal instinct. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that this author could not bring herself to take out all of that evil of patriarchal evil onto the child. Mm-hmm. The child represented a hope that you could create a society better than the situations that brought them into conception. Mm-hmm. And that was such a powerful.
Yeah.
The most powerful scenes in that show are when the woman is about to give birth, and you see all the handmaids together, coming around her, and protecting her.
But that's what I'm talking about. That support.
Yeah.
Like
female,
even though they were in that crazy environment, like seeing all the women like gathering around, and like there was one where the girl has a stillborn, and like the way that the girls gathered around her, like they're all in red, and they basically form a heart around her, like it pans back and you see like this heart, and I was like, wow, like all of them are equally traumatized, all of them have but they have like this understanding and this bond and this love for each other.
Really, really deep bond. And I want to address this whole to be baby carriers thing, because to me this is one of those, it would be like saying, and there's dudes that say this, like that child support is slavery. They say, I'm a slave of child support. right? And the fact of the matter is, I understand why. Economy is very hard, and these guys are getting their checks docked, and they have no say in the matter. Nobody cares about their consent. The judge doesn't give a fuck about your consent. Okay? So when the dudes come to me and they say, I'm enslaved. Nah, bro. You're not enslaved. That's called responsibility. And it's even better than that. You get to care for the next generation. Like, you literally are making sure that our species and our country has a future. Which is why I said at the beginning of the show, everybody's concerned about the American birth rate. Unless you're this super siloed, and this is a problem with our generation. Unless you're this super siloed individual who thinks life is only about you, and it's not about, and that's one of the things that marks a mature person's mind. A child thinks about only what's in front of them. They don't think about the future. An animal cannot think about the future. A child doesn't think about the future. But the more you mature, the more you realize how important the future is. And the more you realize how important it is to sacrifice for the sake of that future. I was just listening to a guy, is Boozy. And there are these gangsters, and it was a father-son combination. And the father and son did a drive-by together. And now the father is testifying against his own son because he wants to get out of jail free. And Boozy says, nigga, you 40, you're 50 years old, you lived your life. You got to do everything possible for your son and your grandkids now. You lived your life. What the fuck are you doing? But this is this, life is only about me. It's only about me. No, life is not only about you. Even from an evolutionary perspective, life isn't about you. So I don't believe that men are slaves when they support their children, and I also don't say, "Oh, look at that baby carrier. That's what a woman is." Ridiculous. I'm not saying you're ridiculous. I'm just saying that is ridiculous. The fact of the matter is, that is something where nature has ordered it, God has ordered it, whatever you want to say. That the product. When you see a woman with a child, especially when things are right, an entire life was sprung out of the love of two people. And a pregnant woman is it was fascinating. In the Latin King gang, they were about to put me in the Latin King gang. They're like, well, you're Jamaican, so you're Caribbean, so it's close. And each gang has rules and all, and principles and all that. And at the top of the rules for the Latin King was that the Latin woman is the pinnacle of everything, and she has to be protected at all costs by any means necessary, because she is the one that brings forth the next generation of Latin kings, blah, 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 blah. So the entire gang culture was centered around protecting women and all that, because they were furthering. So this idea that if you celebrate a woman's pregnancy, or women that celebrate a pregnancy and things like, oh, they're just a baby carrier. No, we're doing something really important. Like, something really, truly important is happening. And completely mysterious. Like, I remember seeing Orion, the first ultrasound we had, it was just a bunch of circles. You remember that? He must have been 6 weeks, whatever.
He looked like a little grain of rice, but he was rolling.
He was just rolling, and
I was like, is he rolling?
And we came back a couple months later, and he's kicking, and it's unbelievable. So, and again, they could not escape that. That was so fascinating.
Yeah.
Like the maternal instinct, the idea that, look, as an adult, I've lived my life, and I live in this horrible situation. She's being assaulted in Gilead, and you could tell she's going through all that shit, but she wants to secure a future where her daughter doesn't have to go through that. And many times, only a kid can get you that kind of a motivation.
Yeah.
And so while I understand the whole meme about, this anti-abortion stuff, you just want women to be carriers, blah, 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 like, I think that that's one of the saddest things, in my opinion, about our current culture, is that being a pregnant woman is demonized. But it's not our side that's demonizing it.
Yeah.
And it's not our side that are telling people, hey, if you were conceived in rape, you shouldn't be here. Because I hope you know, anytime you bring up the rape argument, there are literally millions of people that are on this planet right now that were conceived that way, and you're saying their mom should have killed them. So,
and I was talking to this other woman. So like, I went through years of not being able to get pregnant, and this girl, same thing. She was having a real hard time getting pregnant, and then eventually she did. And so she's completely thrilled about it. She's about my age too. Both of us are close to 40. So the closer to 40 you get, the more realization you have, I guess, that it's a complete miracle. And so, her and I were talking about it, and she was saying like, I hate like that movement and how it tries to take from us the one thing that we do have over men. Men they cannot birth children. They cannot hold a child in their womb, and they cannot feed that child when the child is born from their own body. And it's it's an empowering thing. Like, you know how if you're in a situation where you're terrified and you run from the thing that terrifies you, you're still going to be terrified of that thing until you eventually are able to overcome it, or you're able to like stop that thing. Like, it's always going to keep coming for you. And when you're a mom and you're pregnant and you have these fears about the pregnancy, you have these fears about what is it, can I be even a mom? Will I fail at it? Like, this is such a crazy thing. And then delivery, and there's a lot of things that go along with it. And I'm sure that in an instance of rape, there's a lot more complications that come to mind. But when you go through it and you go through the delivery and you birth that child and you see that human being walking around in the world, and like, I was looking at my boy's eyes today, and I was like, they're like slightly verbal, they're talking some, but they don't talk as much as we do. So I'm looking at them and I'm like, you're looking at their eyes and you can almost see like an entire world behind those eyes where their minds are going and they're thinking about things. And like, when when you birth that child and like you're holding that child from your womb and like, I fucking did this. Like, yeah, like it took the, X amount of time from that first interaction with whomever was there, but you do the rest of that yourself. Like, the next 9 months, that's you. And then the birthing of that child, that's you. And that's a powerful point in a woman's life that nobody can take from her. And so when you have that and you go through that, like, it's empowering. And like, you see it with these women that like at the beginning of her pregnancy, June's, she was like, I don't know if you remember this, but Serena was basically saying like, if anything happens to my baby, something's going to happen to yours. And I didn't know where the storyline was going to go because I've heard so much about *Handmaid's Tale* and how it like going along with like the abortion movement. It was like a lot of the people leaning toward like, yes, we should be aborting children, were also like talked a lot about *Handmaid's Tale*. So I was like, where's this going to go? I thought she was going to try to kill the child as a revolt against the rape.
Right.
And when she didn't, I was very surprised. Yeah. And then when she like passed a certain point with it, and then she began to like hold her own womb and like talk to the child, and like I know women that were raped, kept their child, and all the ones that I know, like, I'm talking about personal experience, all the ones that I know, they all say, I would not want this any other way. Like, that child, that is my saving grace, because from that darkness came this light. And, you hear it a lot of times with people. They'll be like, yeah, so I was with this, your ex or whatever. And you're like, that was a really horrible situation, but I got my kids out of it. Yeah. People say it all the time, like kids can be the real saving grace. And, if somebody's at a point where they go through with the pregnancy and the delivery and they feel like that they're not strong enough to do that, like, you can put that child in the care of somebody else, but you still gave life to that child. Like, end of the day, you still did. And a lot of times people, as they grow, they circle around and they want to meet their kids want to meet them, so.
But I also there's so many things you could talk about relative to the handmaid would give birth to the child, and then they basically would only get to wean the child, and then it would be the property of the mother and all this. And then they would get sent to another house. They would get reassigned to another house, to repeat process again. One of the extrapolations I got from this was, I was in a radical pro-life chat one time, and they were talking about predatory adoptions. Oh yeah. And she brought something up I couldn't believe. She said, we are taking, now this is like pro-life to the absolute extreme, and I'm still like wrestling with this. She said, let me get this straight. These women are in a horrible situation financially. They're ruined. They're wrecked by society, abandoned by everybody. And we show up to them and say, we'll take your child away from you. The child that they're holding on, that they're gestating, and do you know that the placenta and the baby, that the mom and the baby make the placenta? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was gonna send that to you. They call it it's the only by something organ in humans is the placenta, and it's created by baby and mother together.
That's so interesting.
So the mom and the baby are having this, and they're having this crazy existential connection, and because you have more money than them, you swoop in and take their baby from them, and then you call yourself a hero. You just stole this woman's baby. I said, holy shit. She said, what we should do is show up and say, I'll take the kid for as long as you need him. Come see him. We'll have food, shelter, clothing, yada, yada. And then as soon as you're like financially ready to take your baby, he's yours. Mm-hmm. So we will carry the emotional load of having to carry the child and lose him, not the mom. Mm-hmm. If the mom says, no, I completely don't want my child at all, okay, that's one thing. But we're not taking that step. I was like, holy shit. That put the standard so high, because now it's not just we'll adopt your baby. We had those signs, but it was also we actually care about you as a person. Mm-hmm. And I was like, holy shit. And then I thought, and I got to tell you, as a black person, it's weird. These Hollywood people, and they always have some like Nigerian baby or whatever as a little, addition. And, I don't even need a father because I'm a millionaire. What does he need a father for? It's just me. I'm a famous Hollywood person. But that was a sub sort of archetype, is the well-to-do bourgeoisie person who takes a child away from a woman in a bad circumstance and feels like a hero for it. Again, that kind of an archetype, I understand, is not like in our cultural consciousness, but as I'm talking now, there's so much happening in this show. I love the show. I'm actually sad that, I'm glad I don't have to watch those scenes anymore per se. Although they're not playing those scenes anymore for the most part, because
no, they just do them like a couple times, and then you understood what's happening.
So that's good. But that was also that's also a really interesting archetype, is like challenging the pro-life movement and saying, because when we were out there, we had people that walked the talk, and I'm talking about people who adopted severely disabled kids. Toby, that guy with his daughter was doing the basketball with Kobe.
Yeah.
They were like snowflake babies. They were doing IVF, and then they repented of doing IVF. So in order to repent, they adopted one of these snowflake babies. So we were in an extreme.
That's
group.
Babies that are left on ice.
Yeah, an IVF. We were part of a group that walked the fucking talk like you wouldn't believe. Like, we had people there. People like, why don't you adopt? It's like, 4 of these kids are adopted, you duffy. Like, what are you talking about? But But that put the standard even higher. And I really did see that character of Serena, and just the entire system where the baby's away from the lower class women.
Yep.
And that's kind of a dynamic that happens, and it's also part of the of the movement, and it's a blind spot. It's a blind spot.
Oh, absolutely.
In the movement.
Absolutely.
So I thought that's an archetype probably only pro-lifers would pick up on, but
yeah,
it was a big one. The female support, the way that women support each other in this show, is, I wish that women would do this with each other. I haven't seen it on a societal level.
No.
Where women are able to come around in a circle and make a fist and take care of each other. And it's almost similar to how black people are with each other. Like, we're more likely to snipe at each other than to snipe at our enemy. We're more likely to kill each other than kill our enemy. You'll have, I just saw a video where this dude shot this dude in broad daylight on camera, completely bold, no fear. But then a white cop shows up, and they're all running for their lives. And so I see the same type of dynamic a lot, and a lot of it has to do with my watching how women react to you, and just watching how women in the media space interact with each other. Mm-hmm. There's some pretty prominent women, you know, you've got Anna, you've got Crystal Ball, you've got Brianna Joy Gray. These are all kind of left-wing, progressive, but they don't work together. Mm-hmm. You know, and half the time they're sniping at each other. Mm-hmm. Anna's taking subliminals at Crystal Ball. Crystal Ball doesn't even act like Anna's alive. And I understand why. I mean, there's an obvious difference between Crystal Ball and Anna Conspiran. But to me, it's just like, damn, there isn't that unity where the girls come around each other and really fight for each other.
Yeah, and you would see it also in the comment sections when, you know, there was a lot of research that you were doing into porn and how it was like the effect that it was having on these girls, the ones that would leave it and stuff like that. And when the girls would leave it and then they would speak out after to say like, this was not empowering, in fact, and they're like explaining exactly like how traumatizing it was to them. The women in the comment sections were horrible to them.
Oh, that's true.
They were just ruthless, disgusting. I couldn't
really
believe
bitter.
it.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah. So that was probably the most beautiful aspect of that show, was the way that the women worked together. I also loved June's character, the way that she was able to jujitsu the situation, meaning the way that she was able to find a way to use her power in a completely powerless situation. And I loved it because they didn't turn her into like a Delta operator. Like, she wasn't like, phew, like, it was very real. Dudes could outrun her. Dudes were, you know, could overpower her. But she had her mind, and she used her mind to get kids out, to get other people out. I don't want to like put a bunch of spoilers in there, but I loved the way that they showed, because I love being able to jujitsu as a you know, operating from a deficit and still finding a way to win, having both hands tied behind your back and finding a way to beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match. Like, that is what this woman was up against, and I just thought it was so brilliant.
Yeah.
The way that she set chess pieces in motion, the way that she used all the information that she had. You can tell every situation she was in, she was reading people, assessing the situation, looking for weaknesses. Even in terrible moments when it looked like she was completely losing and the guys had completely dominated, she was winning. I thought that was probably, she to me is probably the most well written hero / anti-hero in TV right now.
Yeah.
She's just
they did a really good job.
I love Cersei from Game of Thrones. The way they ended her character, I thought, was completely weak sauce. And her character, you know, there really wasn't much of a major arc. There's a major arc with the June character. She gets progressively more and more dark because there are more bodies that continuously get stacked up, whether it's good-willing men who are trying to help her or the girls that are following her like a cult leader. People end up dying, significant people end up dying, and she pays the price for it. And you can see psychologically she's getting more and more animalistic and vengeful and murderous. And so I thought it was just such a very... There's a lot of cautionary tales in Handmaid's Tale. I think that's one of the messages, like, of the show.
I think with the jujitsu thing, I really liked that aspect of it too, but I liked that it showed when she first got there, she was trying to get out, and then she gets to a point where she gets so discouraged that, like, depression sets in, and she's unable to do anything, and she's completely powerless, and she's going literally nowhere. And then she has to pull herself out of that darkness to be able to start accomplishing what she needs to accomplish, and then she kind of gets her bearings about her, and she comes back out of it, which I thought that was important, because I think that there's a lot of obstacles that we as women have to face, and you can let the collective trauma get you down. Not only your situations, but all the stories that you hear from your sisters, your friends, your all the other women around you. Like, sometimes it gets so overbearing and so overwhelming to just hear like all the abuses that have taken place, all of the sins that have gone unpunished, there's been no justice done, so much stuff swept under the carpet, and just the overall pain. And like I have a Rolodex in my head of the different situations that I just think, oh my gosh, and nobody paid a price for that. And so I think that when you look at her situation and where she kind of got that overwhelming feeling and she got that depression, like she didn't stay there. She was like, all right, the only way for me to make this better is don't let the bastards get you down.
She converted it to anger though. And that anger she converted into vengeful actions, and you can just see in her soul.
But it darkens her.
It's taking a real heavy price.
Yep.
It's a toll that she's carrying. And it makes me dislike Luke even more because she's left to carry that by herself, and she has to do certain moves and go on certain ops, and he just stays behind honestly, from my vantage point, just like a woman. Like, dude, like your wife's out there going to war. You should be out there going to war. You should be out there trying to find dude and murder him. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Candy apples. This guy, you know that the dude that raped your wife is in the country? And you're not trying to see this man? Like
he did. Remember, he's holding the sign. Like they even made contact too.
I was like,
what?
I can't deal with that guy. I can't deal with that guy. But one of the sub sort of themes is this concept of redemption.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where Serena, who's part of the oppressive class, is asking for forgiveness because her child, now she's pregnant. She could never have kids. Now she's pregnant, and she's terrified that she's going to have some sort of miscarriage because she knows that she's been evil. And it's fascinating because June goes to see her and says, basically, God will never allow you to have this baby. God is gonna take this child from, and it was just crazy to see her say that. Like the ultimate punishment for this woman would be that she would have a miscarriage. But all these people are reading the story and saying, "Oh, if we can't have abortion, it's gonna turn into the Handmaid's Tale." Like, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. The babies are all. To me, it seems like the babies are way more important to the women of the show than it are to the men. Mm-hmm. It's Fred doesn't go crazy when the kid gets kidnapped. He's like, oh, that's terrible. Of course, right. Fred knows it's not his kid. It is, but it's not Serena's kid either. And when the kid escapes, Serena loses her mind. As a matter of fact, they were going to go back to normal. She got to visit the kid for 20 minutes, and then everything changed for her. Like, it really was a turning point of the entire show because everything popped off after that. So the value of babies was actually at the experiential level was way higher for the women than it was for the oppressive men.
And I mean, she sold out her husband.
Yeah, she sold out. Yeah, sorry for the spoiler, guys, but she sold out her husband for the sake of the kid.
Yeah, we said there was spoilers.
Which is what you're supposed to do, by the way. I mean, obviously, if it's between me and the kid, you need to choose the kid every time. I'd never forgive you, so you might as well not even choose me over the kid because there won't be any of us. You see what I'm saying? So just take the kid.
Straight misery.
But if it was the other way around, I'd pick you. But it's different because you can have more kids. I can't. Okay, so that's how.
And I would be very angry with you if you didn't pick me.
That's all right, though.
I mean, if you didn't pick them, if you picked me over them,
but I could justify that double standard to myself, no problem. So yeah, the concept of redemption was a big one. In the story, it's like, if you've done this crazy evil, is there any way to come back? And June's answer right now is no. You cross the line, and you take, basically, if you abandon the cause and take up arms with the enemy, like, you're out. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people were saying that after the Trump election, like all the white women who voted for, because it was white women that turned the tide for Trump over and against Hillary Clinton. And, you know, they were saying there's a special place in hell for you know. All overall, Handmaid's Tale is currently my favorite show.
I was very disappointed in Fred's death.
I wasn't disappointed in Fred's death. I'm sure they're gonna fill us in on the details of how it happened.
I just wanted him to be trapped somewhere and lose everything slowly.
I mean, yeah, I think
I just feel like he got off too easily.
The idea of him being basically beaten to death by a bunch of women, I think, is just too much to pass up for the show.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think.
Plus, that was pretty gross to me. Like when June was saying it, like she was explaining it, I was like, yeah, and then all of a sudden I hit a point where I was like, wait, you're getting too dark. Remember I looked at you? I was like, she's getting too dark now.
Yeah.
And then, obviously it transitions into that scene. I just thought, it was too quick. I really wanted him, like, if they were going to do that, I would have wanted that to be at the end of a lot of suffering. I would want him to be trapped somewhere. He has to watch Serena get separated from the baby, all these different things. Like, I just wanted him to suffer more.
Yeah, I
just it was over too quick.
I think the visceral understanding of it was too much to pass up. And, it was sort of this animalistic sort of wolf pack type situation. That's kind of the aesthetic that they were bringing out as a bunch of wolves. I thought it was a little bit unrealistic. I mean, if there's no actual weapon there, there's branches and shit. Like a man would have been. I don't really. But it's okay. I mean, that was only the one time when I was like, it's probably not very realistic. But
he wasn't in handcuffs?
I don't think he was in handcuffs.
Pretty sure he was handcuffed.
No, I think he was running, and then she said choose, because she had the gun or the whatever. He wasn't in handcuffs. He could have.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I thought he was in handcuffs.
But
I mean, the ending, that kind of reminded me of, now I can't remember the name of it. Remember that one where the guy came in, he rolled up into town, all the women would go through a surgery, and then they had to take their pill every couple of hours, and it kept them, like, perfect, and the whole place was perfect. Oh, what was the name of that? You remember that movie?
What do you mean, The Giver?
No.
But what about it?
It just reminded me of that, because at the end of that movie, the same thing happens. Like, all the women turn on him and they kill him with their heels.
Yeah,
high heels.
I thought that was kind of the expression of, like, the collective consciousness type situation, frustration of all women. They're able to take out all their, their anger and all that on Fred or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's obviously not the person, it's the system.
Stepford Wives? Is that right?
But yeah. So anyway, that was terrible, and Michelle just shared something really pretty personal. She had a miscarriage, and the daughter she has now is her rainbow baby. So shout out to Michelle and the rainbow baby. Yeah, it was Stepford Wives. And then the wives turned on the guy at the end of the show, I guess. But
kill them with their high heels.
I love the show. I love the depth of the characters. None of the characters are simplistic. I love that about Offred is so layered, and she's extremely flawed, and her flaws get called out by her teammates, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And she's progressively getting darker and darker and darker.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it, but again, it was mind blowing to me how they portrayed the children. It's just insane. Look, a good writer, you can make the child be a predator. You be this. You could show her hating the child. You could do an episode where she's finding all different ways to try to come up with like a natural abortion, and it would have been yay, women.
I thought for sure.
And they never did that. They never did that.
Yeah.
And I was certain that was going to happen. And I was blown away by the fact that it was all of these children conceived in sexual assault end up saving essentially the world from these Gileadians.
Yeah.
It was very, very powerful. And one of those things where I'm like, okay, if you believe God superintends everything, well, there you go. Mm-hmm. So, all right, guys. Look at that. We've got a Gileadian in here that believes that all women are good for is sexual pleasure.
Unbelievable.
So there you go. Okay. Much love to all you guys. I don't think I have anything else to say. If you haven't seen the show, I was kind of trying to leave out that Fred died, but we did put spoilers out there, so I'm sorry. It is what it is. But if you haven't seen the show, I do think you should give it a try, especially if you're on the right-wing side of things. It'll give you more of an understanding of why a lot of your female friends have high anxiety. And I got to tell you, Clarence Thomas going out and attacking the Obergefell decision, which is the gay marriage decision. 190 plus Republicans 157 plus Republicans voting against codifying same-sex marriage into law. I'll say this. I don't think we're in Gilead in the sense of that, but I do think there are definitely elements to where even if Gilead isn't full blown, if the evangelical right is not seriously challenged and curtailed, I don't think you'll ever have it done exactly like Gilead, which I don't think is Margaret Atwood's point. I think principially, if these folks get as much power as they want, it could be. I definitely could see how it would be a very, very scary time. Clarence Thomas brought up the Obergefell decision for no reason. Like, I understand there's legal precedent in the sense that, okay, Roe, they snuck in, this act of killing under the right to privacy. It was ridiculous. The Supreme Court never had that jurisdiction. You should have left it to the states. But there's no reason to bring up Obergefell. It has absolutely nothing to do with the abortion discussion. It literally is impossible to have the abortion discussion and the Obergefell discussion. You're talking about two gay people who want to be married. They can't get pregnant and have abortions. Like, they could do the surrogacy thing and then decide that they're not going to do it. Whatever.
I don't think that would.
But you see my point.
Yeah.
Like, why bring that up? Why bring that up? And then you find out that 157 plus Republicans voted against that. 195 Republicans voted against contraception. That was the other thing. And look, again, I'm against all abortifacients, but you could have went back, because this happens all the time. This happened in the Louisiana bill. They were trying to give girls a death penalty for abortion. The House in Louisiana said, no, we're not doing that. We'll give the doctor 10 years. We're not going to kill a woman. We're not going to touch a woman.
Yeah.
Which is what we should do.
Yeah.
Which should be the standpoint forever. Just like with the Nordic model. We're not going to punish the women. We're going to punish the people and the societies that create those situations. We're not going to punish women for surviving. But the point is, the House went back and said, no, we're not going to vote on this with this in the bill. No way. And they took it out. So my point is, even if there were abortifacients in the contraception bill, that's something where you can go back to the negotiating table and say, hey, take this out and then we'll vote for it. But 195 Republicans voted against contraception and against codifying gay marriage into law. There's an obvious connection between contraception and abortion, meaning this is actually an argument that Margaret Sanger was using. A lot of people don't understand that. When Margaret Sanger went to China, the Chinese were already practicing really barbarous forms of child killing. Mm-hmm. And Sanger's argument was, if you would just practice birth control, you wouldn't need to kill your child. You wouldn't need to do all these barbarous actions. So it wasn't like Margaret Sanger was running around flying on her broom trying to get everybody to have these abortions. She looked at abortions as a way of stymieing those situations. So why would you be against contraception?
Yeah.
If you want to lower the amount of abortions.
Yeah.
But this feeds right into the conspiracy theory of, look, they're doing this because they want to populate America. This is a population thing.
That is kind of weird.
Because if you look at Roe is obviously going to affect the population. But Obergefell, think about it. They can't make new children. So they're gone. And then let's get rid of contraception. So if you are looking at the Republican Party as Gilead, there are absolutely decisions that are made at the supreme level. I mean, think about it. It's called the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
You know, that was, as a pro-lifer, like, we made these shirts, Ignore Roe. There's like thousands of people walking around with Ignore Roe shirts. Like people think that when you hear Supreme Court, they think that's it. It's not, but that's what people are looking at how the judicial branch works with the state, you know. But if you were in the pro-life side, you always had to know that. That was like 101. You had to understand that. But now that you're seeing people in the Supreme Court coming out and bragging about this, spiking the football, doing the Obergefell thing, doing the contraception thing, right before they announced the Supreme Court thing, they made even more lax gun law. They laxed the gun laws even more in New York, for example. if I had the idea, yes, there's a right-wing cabal hell-bent on turning America into Gilead, there is no way that you could look at what's going on right now and not make those correlations or not be concerned.
Yeah.
I think that's a, you know, when I watch the show, I'm like, damn, okay, I definitely see where they're coming from with that. I definitely can, because some of this shit is inexplicable to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like,
that is
if you
pretty
want
weird.
less abortions, then we should be the head of the line telling people about, you know, non-abortifacient contraceptives.
Mm-hmm.
If we want kids adopted, we should be happy that gay people are getting married because they're more likely to adopt.
Right.
So it's a very, but if you're worried about population growth, then all those three decisions make absolute sense to me completely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you know, Candy's concerned. I understand that concern. I like I said, it doesn't need to be a full-blown we have sex farms and all that for it to be an oppressive environment any more than as a black person we need to go back to plantations for it to be an oppressive environment. Mm-hmm. And so I do think this is what's fascinating to me, is that this show has converted me in the sense that I'm keeping an extremely skeptical eye on pretty much all of these people, especially Republicans. You know, I'm not going to do the Cenk Uygur thing and say all Republicans are evil, but I do think that there's some really, really bad actors at some very high levels that on the street level, the people who are grinding on the street for the pro-life, like Albany and Kay and the stuff that we're doing, those folks, like, they're not Gileadians at all. But the people that are passing policy, who are not on the ground, don't love these women, haven't heard their stories, have never cried with anybody post-abortion. Those are the people that are making the laws, though.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm definitely, the show has definitely woken me up to, we have to watch this stuff really, really carefully.
Yeah.
Because when you combine the prevalence of guns with that ideology, it doesn't take a lot. I mean, you had one guy, Trump put in 3 Supreme Court justices in one term, and half the amount of circuit justices that Obama did in 2 terms. Mm-hmm. So, and right now, it's either going to be Trump or DeSantis. And DeSantis, I'm telling you guys right now, you want Trump. Because like I've been saying, Trump will tweet it. DeSantis will sign it. He will create a law. He will do something. All Disney did was write a letter, and he completely went scorched earth on them. So I think DeSantis, is a lot. I think Republicans are turning against Trump. I think the January 6th stuff is bad, and I just think that people like Ben Shapiro and stuff look at how efficient of an operator DeSantis is. And people were talking about this. They're like, listen, if we don't learn the lessons from Trump, who's an imbecile, we're going to end up with somebody who knows what the fuck they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you right now, I'm extremely... all the don't say gay stuff and using libs of TikTok to write legislation, that's his brand. Mm-hmm. And so if he gets elected, man, I'm not going to say it's going to be Gilead, but he could put people in office who are, I don't know. Because we do have a birthing problem in this country. Mm-hmm. So it's not like outside of the realm of possibility. And, you know, part of me is like on a you know, cognitive level, is like, look, this is part of like natural selection correcting itself. Our country has a low birth rate, and so wouldn't you know, nature and evolution has made it so that now the abortion shit, that's going away because it's nature self-correcting. Right? And from that perspective, from a Sam Harris perspective, then you can't argue against Gilead. Because if we're just here, we're just animals, and we're at the mercy of nature and all the rest of it, and there's nothing about us that transcends nature, then all these curtailing of rights are simply just a form of nature correcting itself so that we can go ahead and repopulate America. If you have that worldview, there's no other way to look at that. So anyway, thank you guys for hanging out. I voted for the crackhead.
Hey, Kai is on here, and that's his gift to us. So I thought we could open that. Or do you want to wait on the other channel? Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you guys very much. Much love to everybody here. I really do encourage you, if you're a right-leaning person, at least to watch the first season of the show. I think it's important to I was converted mentally in a few aspects of what was brought up in the show, and it's made me a lot more sensitive. I remember when Roe came out, I had a couple people saying they're going after a Burgerfeld, blah blah blah. I said I don't care about, and to be honest with you, like when I put it on the scale of like, oh, interracial marriage might get rescinded, I don't care. Like, we're not killing babies, I'm good. Let the state say that our marriage is invalid. Who cares? That's between us and the law. I don't care.
Yeah.
But, so that was kind of my attitude. But I also realized that not everybody's like me. I also realized that there are some severe consequences, and if you're in certain brackets in this country where that could really harm people. So I didn't take it seriously. But after watching the show, and then like looking at the news, I'm like,
it was a little weird. Yeah.
What the fuck is happening here?
Yeah, that is weird.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, this is like this is not. So I'm absolutely keeping a very watchful and skeptical eye of the Republican Party and those operators, and particularly DeSantis, because my whole thing about Trump was the guy. He's a cartoon character, and people need to grow up. Oh my God, he said something mean about you on Twitter. Get the fuck over it. You know, I just looked at that like, you got a bunch of privileged, soft people who are like, fucking sign off. But DeSantis is not gonna tweet about shit, bro. Like, he doesn't tweet. He passes legislation, and that should worry everybody. Like, if you have any sort of balance at all to your political perceptions, that should worry you. The rise of Mr. DeSantis, and if it's a lesser of two evil, I would never vote for either one of them. But if it's a lesser of two evil, then by a mile, I would rather Trump than DeSantis, by a mile, because
I hear you. He'll tweet about it.
he'll tweet about it.
We'll know what he's doing. Yeah.
And I think the second time around, people will be mature enough to realize it could be worse. He barely got to be a governor over a crackhead, though, Viddy. Yeah, I agree. But now that he is, I'm telling you, the stuff that he's done against the LGBT community, the way he's leveraged himself as a sort of right-wing icon now because of what he did to the LGBT community in Florida. I'm sorry, but I know my group. I know my people. As far as right-wing evangelicals, like that's gonna push him over. Okay. Godless Left says, what pissed me off most about Trump was that what was happening at the border to children. Then I found out the shit started under Obama. Yeah, like all of us, Left. And then they told us, oh, that's whataboutism. Don't worry about it. So when Joe Biden got elected, we were all supposed to act like nothing happened. Yeah, I know. Here we are. I did not get that yet, but all right, guys, we're gonna land the plane. Much love to everybody that was there. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to show up. Shout out to Jay. And we are out of here. Much love to everybody. Stay away from the Gileadians, I guess, is the moral of the story. Whether the right-wing Gileadians who only want you for your baby, or the left-wing Gileadians who only want you for their sexual pleasure, run far and fast from either one of them. There it is, dear listener. Vin out.
Sori out.
Gone. Michelle, we will check our email.